Images. Nope, still can't hear you. What am I looking at? That's interesting. There we go.
Hello.
Hi.
What's up?
Not much.
What do you want to talk about?
Potatoes.
I like them fried, like French fries.
That's cool.
Do you like French fries?
Nope.
Why not?
Because they're French.
Oh. Can anyone hear me?
Yes, we can hear you now. It is fixed.
Okay. Good. I've got a stupid computer. Oh, good morning, everyone. It's good to be.
Your mic is still doing the breaking up thing it was doing last time. I don't know why.
Good morning.
Good morning.
Yeah, we can hear you.
Nice. Yeah, about the breaking up, I'm not quite sure what to do. I know I've got a really good connection and I'm plugged in directly to the router.
I don't think it's your internet connection. I think it's something to do with the mic connecting to Discord.
Oh, you know what? I may have turned up something that I shouldn't have. Let me see.
I don't want that.
Okay, hopefully that'll be a little less frequent where I'm breaking up. How's that?
I think it sounds better.
Okay, good.
All right. Anybody questions, comments, God, philosophy, politics, potatoes?
Yeah, I want to ask you a question about God's existence.
Sure, go for it.
Would you want to hear it?
No, but you can ask anyway.
Okay. So I wanted to ask you, are you an atheist or an agnostic?
Atheist.
How do you define it?
God does not exist.
Do you have a proof for that?
Yes, all concepts in all concepts in human imagination start as imaginary until demonstrated otherwise. God is a concept in human imagination, therefore it is imaginary until evidence is provided. No evidence is provided, therefore it's imaginary.
Evidence, no evidence provided. Okay. Why do you believe that?
Because I have been seeking evidence from the people who are supposed experts, and none of them can provide any.
What would be good enough evidence for you?
Novel, testable predictions.
Okay, so what do you think about the beginning of the universe?
I think it's cool.
Yeah. How did it begin from your perspective?
Probably quantum.
What are things in your mind?
Probably quantum fluctuations.
Can you elaborate more?
Yeah, quantum fields exist. There are fluctuations in those fields. Those fluctuations can create particles and large groups of particles, and that's how virtual particles pop into existence. And then used through Hawking radiation, they can separate and other processes like Hawking radiation. So if there is a big enough quantum fluctuation, it could create all of the matter in the Big Bang, separate it into particles and antiparticles, and then poof, we have the beginning of the universe.
So what caused these fluctuations?
They're inherent to the nature of quantum fields.
So they were always there?
Yeah.
Do you have a proof for that?
All of the evidence indicates that quantum fields are the most fundamental thing in reality. And so it's the most rational conclusion to think that they are uncreated. There's no reason to think they were created. There's no evidence to say there's more fundamental things. First law of physics. So, yeah.
So there was no time before Big Bang.
Time is a field. There could be multiple kinds of time, but space-time is a field that exists in our universe. There are other fields that exist outside of our universe where stuff can happen. Time isn't the only way for things to change.
I would add that it's not that there's no time before the Big Bang. It's just that we don't know what else could be, before that. We just not like either the quality or the type of evidence that it's out there. We just simply don't know. But with that, we can't assume that there was no time before the Big Bang. Does that make sense?
Kinda. But here's a question I want to ask. So, do you think that this universe that we know right now could have just came by and just poof expanded out of these fluctuations?
Yes, that's what the evidence in
Life
physics suggests.
forms
That's what all the evidence suggests.
exists.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, when you describe as poof, right? A lot went on for a long, long time too. So it's not like this, sort of like a magical spell kind of poof. Nothing's here now. All of a sudden, something's there, but a very long process.
How did the first life form arise?
Abiogenesis.
What is that?
It's how life came about from non-life through prebiotic evolution.
Okay, explain how it happened.
Okay, RNA was forming on clay because the molecules in the clay form in such a way that it causes the RNA to form in a consistent pattern, and that consistent pattern can sometimes be self-replicating. And when it's self-replicating, the ones that replicate successfully become selected for, because the ones that don't die off, and therefore you have prebiotic selection, prebiotic evolution. That prebiotic evolution selects for the most successful self-replicators, and the most successful self-replicators grow into more successful molecules, which then can develop into DNA, and DNA can then develop into cells, et cetera, et cetera.
So as we know now, as we can agree, over time, when time passes, things tend to become less good.
What?
Things get worse
No.
when time passes by.
No.
That's because when you leave a ship on the sea for 10, if you go and come back 10 years later, you'll see the ship rusty and
No. That is wrong. That is incorrect. Like if you watch the planet over time, more continents form, more mountains form, more structures form. What you're talking about, the second law of thermodynamics, only applies to closed systems. So if you have a closed system, over time, it will lead to chaos, to decay. But if you have a big energy source that's adding energy to the system, then that system will become more complicated over time because the energy added to the system will generate complexity. And we do have a giant energy source right next to us. It's called the sun. Because we have a giant energy source, things will not go to disorder.
Well, here's the thing. How is the sun? Like, how is it? Where is it finding the energy from? Where is it coming from?
Fission and fusion. Fusion energy.
Yeah, I know that. I'm saying that. How is this infusion has been going on for so long?
Because there's a whole bunch of hydrogen, and the hydrogen is being collapsed through gravity, and the gravity then causes the fusion of the hydrogen atoms into heavier atoms, which then releases tons of energy, which comes off of light and heat, which then hits the planet. And there's a bunch of it.
Yeah, I know that. I'm saying that. Isn't it crazy how it's in a perfect system?
No, it's not a perfect system.
Everything is just perfectly in line. You know what I'm saying?
No. Like 99% of life forms die miserable deaths. It is not a perfect system.
What do you mean 99% of life forms die?
Where are your great grandparents right now?
Yeah, death is part of the system. It's not something that is miserable.
That's literally what misery is.
Are you saying that everything should last forever?
Yes, if it was a perfect system, nothing would die unless it consented to die.
Why?
Because the definition
well, that's
of
not
perfect,
what the system is.
right, because it's a crappy system. So it's not a perfect system, it's a crappy system.
Wait, give me a second. I have a question, Mr. Jump.
Sure, go for it.
So, is your mind perfect? Because how would you question the validity of a system if your mind also is not perfect?
You don't need a perfect mind to do validity. Validity is simply the ability to see that a conclusion follows from the premises. You don't need a perfect mind to do that. You just need a mind that can see validity. Like,
Yeah. Okay, we can test how valid something is. Like we can see how likely this thing is to be correct. But I'm saying, how can you say with 100% certainty whether or not this system is correct, perfect, or flawed?
you don't need 100% certainty for knowledge.
You don't need 100% certainty for knowledge. I agree, but you're making the certain claim that it's not perfect, and I'm asking you, why can you assert definitively that it isn't perfect?
Again, you don't need certainty. I can claim a knowledge claim. It's not perfect, and I don't need certainty. Certainty is just irrelevant. It's the stupid thing stupid people ask for because they don't know how knowledge works. Knowledge is a justified true belief. So if we have evidence of what morality is, and we have evidence of what the pinnacle of what morality is, and we can say that our world is not like that. Like there are drowning babies. That's not perfect. Therefore, this world is not perfect. Very simple.
Okay, but how would you say that? Like, for example, in fact, do you think that like abortion is morally correct or not? Because I feel like I'm a bit outclassed to this topic. So
It's a justified immoral action. So it's immoral to kill anyone ever for any reason. But if you're doing it in self-defense, it's a justified immoral action. So if like you have rights
okay,
over
I
your
see what you
body
mean.
and someone else is in your body without your consent, then you have the justified right to remove them from your body, even if it kills them.
But why do you think that like killing? Why do you think that we should be allowed to kill these things if they did not pose any
Because it's
form of
inside
major
of your
harm
body. Well,
towards
it
the
does
person?
pose major harm to your body. So literally pregnancy separates your organs, spreads your body. Like imagine if I took a cantaloupe and shoved it up your butt. Is that a major concern to your body? Is that a major risk? Like, would you be justified in
I
using
don't.
self-defense or a gun to stop me from shoving a cantaloupe up your butt?
I think it'd be justified for me to stop you if this thing had like any form of negative effect on you.
Wait,
I'm saying that
stop,
in the case where it's like,
listen.
wait,
No,
wait,
no. I had a very specific question here. So I have a cantaloupe, and I'm going to
my
shove it
fault,
up
my
your butt.
fault.
I'm going to shove it up your butt as hard as I can till it's all the way inside of you. Do you have the right
I
to
think I could
shoot
take
me
that.
to stop me?
I don't think I should be allowed to kill you, but I think I should be allowed to defend myself, throwing down lethal means. So, for example, in this analogy, it'd be, oh, you can prevent yourself from getting pregnant by simply abstaining.
So your only options are you can shoot me and kill me, or you can't stop me at all.
Yeah, that'd just be a false dichotomy.
No, it's a thought experiment.
That'd just be a
It's a
false
thought
dichotomy.
experiment. So thought experiments.
Okay, and
No, stop.
Okay, go ahead.
So here are your only
Go
options.
ahead. My
Either
fault.
you can kill me, or I'm going to successfully shove a cantaloupe up your butt. Are you justified in using lethal force to stop me? Now, every law in every state says you're justified in using lethal force to stop me. Everyone.
No, wait, okay. Can I respond
Sure.
now? Okay, yeah. So I think that's just completely disanalogous because it'd be like this. Okay, if there are laws like if I'm allowed to defend myself, if the thing that you're going to do to me, in the case that you successfully did it, if it's non-lethal, then I'd see no reason as to why I should be able to kill you for like stop you from doing something that isn't even gonna kill me. It's just an inconvenience. It doesn't stop me from being killed. That's why I'm saying that this is so disanalogous because in the case of abortions, it'd be like, oh, well, you can stop this thing from happening by abstaining.
The stopping doesn't matter. That's irrelevant. This is a stupid argument. So
wait,
again,
but since you've consented to this
stop. So the question
right, then
in
you
law,
have no right.
stop. I'm going to kick you off. So in law, you're justified in using lethal force under 4 conditions. Risk and the 4 conditions are defined as great bodily harm, not death. Death is one of the options, but you don't need to have a risk of death to use self-defense. Like if someone's coming at you with a baseball
But wouldn't
bat,
you just mean that it's likely?
Shush. So it doesn't matter. Let's say death is 0%. You have 0% chance of dying. Someone's just trying to cut your toe off or something. That's great bodily harm because great bodily harm counts as permanent scarring, loss or permanent disfigurement, great physical or emotional damage, or death. Any of those 4. Doesn't have to be death. Death doesn't matter here. So if I'm going to cut your toe off, even though it has no chance of killing you, you still have a right to use lethal force to stop me because it constitutes great bodily harm.
Yeah, I disagree. Okay, yeah. So I disagree with the great bodily harm point.
That's stupid. Then you just have a stupid definition. And you don't understand basic law.
Wait. I was good. Do you want me to explain why I disagree?
Not really. It's just stupid. So I don't really, at that point I know you're dumb because you don't understand anything about basic logic.
Okay, well, I'll just explain anyway, see if you can understand my point better. But I think that in the case of when they're talking about great bodily harm, it just means that, oh, you can do things that increase the likelihood of you dying.
No, that's
I'm saying
stupid.
that in the case of
that's stupid. You're done. So great bodily harm, as I literally just explained, has nothing to do with dying. Dying is one of the options. Then there's 3 other options that are literally not including the dying: permanent or bodily disfigurement, scarring, physical or emotional damage and pain. Nothing to do with death, so you're just an idiot. Yes, if someone is causing physical harm, like gonna shove a cantaloupe up your butt, or pregnancy, which is the opposite of that, you are justified in using lethal force to stop them. Hello, Fondue.
Hello. Well, just to like follow up with his, not necessarily the argument you were having with him, but you made a point as to basically comparing pregnancy to somebody shoving a cantaloupe up your butt. But like humanity as a species, we reproduce, and one of those options is the way that humans do that specifically is pregnancy. So I don't know if it's 100% analogous to well, the point is, well, I guess it goes back to the point that you were making before of us living in a crappy system.
Sure.
Right? So like the point that I'm confused about is what's good or bad to, say, for example, humans will will likely be part of how humans exist.
Sure.
You understand what I'm saying?
Sure, but I think what you're saying is called a naturalistic fallacy or an appeal to nature fallacy, where you're saying that because of the way nature works, nature entails pregnancy. Therefore, even if pregnancy causes harm, because it's natural, that diminishes your ability to use the self-defense argument, which is false. It's called an appeal to nature fallacy. Just because
Well, I'm not saying that specifically. I'm saying that because it's not necessary to the point of it being self-defense. It's more to the point that it's excuse me. It's more to the point that like what's good or bad to human beings will be kind of like built into them based on like
yes,
the mode in
that's
which
an
they
appeal
exist.
to nature fallacy. Google appeal to nature fallacy.
Okay.
You're also generalizing that just because something might be good for the human species as a whole doesn't necessarily mean that it'd be good for for every individual. So there's some subjectivity that we have to keep in mind as well.
Yeah, I think that's more closer to the point that I was trying to make. So, like in the idea of a best possible world, would it just include humans, or would it include just
All
anything?
conscious agents. But so
Okay.
if you Google appeal to nature fallacy, what should pop up is the appeal to nature fallacy is a logical fallacy that occurs when something is claimed to be good because it's perceived as natural or bad because it's perceived as unnatural. The fact that something's natural, like childbirth, has nothing to do with whether or not it's good or should be allowed at all. There can be completely natural things that are all 100% bad that we should stop in all cases, even though they're natural. Natural has no effect on good or bad.
And not to mention that nature also does display that reproduction is not always a thing. Like it's a seasonal thing as well. Think of plants and fruits. It's not beneficial to some of them to always be pumping fruit, So again, appealing to nature, you've got to consider other things.
I understand that much. I guess the issue that I would have is like in a best possible world, would like life as we understand it exist?
It can. So, best possible worlds, the way it would look like is every conscious agent gets their own universe. They can design it however they want. And it's physically impossible to force anyone to do anything they don't consent to doing. So, if you consent to be human and you consent to the physical limitations, then sure, we can have life as we know it in the universe, but only for those people who consent to live in such a way.
Okay. Well, this best possible world is just a hypothetical that we use to kind of determine right from wrong in our current life, or is it just like
It's in a model
type
of
of world
objective
that
morality. So, it's a model of perfect morality in all possible worlds of what absolute morality would look like. And then we're going to try to get as close as possible given our current world.
Okay, I
And
understand.
also, not to mention that when you get into a conversation about best possible world, like where's the end of that? Like you can always come up with a better island, for example.
No, you can't.
I could argue, and so yeah, you can if it's for me.
Well, so
I mean, like theoretically,
my definition of the perfect island, the best possible world is everyone gets to design their own universe however they want, and it's impossible to force anyone to do anything they don't consent to doing. How could you make that a better island?
I don't know. You could add to it that I don't know, weed's legal or like women, I don't know,
Wait.
or
So
a certain
remember,
way. I don't know. But you can always come up with some criteria that's better
the
for you.
first law is everybody gets their own universe and they can design it with whatever rules they want. So all of the rules you included, you can already have that in their universe, and that's already included in my definition.
Well, your definition seems to assume that then there's no possible way to make one universe better. So isn't that a little circular?
No. So like if you think of a way to make it better, my only rule is that you can't force people to do things they don't consent to doing. So whatever you think of, as long as they consent to it, that's already a part of my island. That's already in the definition of my island, because my island is anything anyone consents to doing.
Yeah. I'm a little slow thinking. I'm gonna have to chill on that one, P-Jump.
Sure, no problem.
So, well, isn't it more two rules? Because the one rule would be that everybody gets their own island, and then the other rule would be that you can't force people to do things that they don't want, right?
Well, there's only one really rule, which is any involuntary imposition of will is immoral. And the way to achieve that rule is by giving everyone their own universe and by making it impossible to force anyone to do anything they don't consent to doing. So the definition of immorality is any involuntary imposition of will is immoral, and voluntary assistance of will is moral. And in order to maximize a perfectly moral universe, the way that would look like is everyone would get their own universe and it would be impossible to force anyone to do what they're doing. So it's just one moral principle. And then the two things I listed are the ways to achieve that moral principle.
I understand. I don't have anything else. If anybody else wants to jump
Cool.
up.
Anybody else? Audience? Questions, comments, philosophy, politics, morality, potatoes? I'm going to keep looking on Amazon for bike stuff. Amazon. Bike. Got a job as a bike delivery. Bike courier. Trying to get in shape and make money at the same time. Raise your hand if you have anything you want to ask or talk about stuff.
Okay, maybe we can just go right back to the hole that I was digging.
Sure.
If we simply add, because I was thinking maybe about it a little more simple, like if I just add a roller coaster to my island, and that makes my island better than one who does not have, but that does not have a roller coaster. That's kind of like where I'm coming from. Like, where does that fit into the rule that you made that somehow trumps that? Or yeah, tell me about
So
that.
everybody gets their own universe and they can design it however they want. So if you want a roller coaster, you can snap your fingers and make a roller coaster, and that's already included in my model. And if somebody doesn't want a roller coaster, they don't have to have a roller coaster. And so anything that you can imagine, you can add to your own world. So anything that you could add another pizza, add another golden apple, whatever, that's already included in my rule, because my rule is you get your own universe and you can design it however you want. Thank you for the super chat. Nostalgic sounds. Appreciate it. I don't know why the chat doesn't show up normally anymore. It should. Mandu, Moonshoes, Trillion, how's it going? Eves. 60-second skeptic. All right. Poof, a fart. Hello, winter. Ow. Still need to figure out how to do the phone thing, because I can get Google Voice to work for call-ins, and I can get it to show up on my stream, but I don't can't get it to show up on Discord without like a digital audio cable, virtual audio cable.
Mm-hmm. Or it could be a security thing.
A what?
Security thing, maybe some sort of security.
No, I don't think so. I think it's just that for Discord only recognizes audio inputs, and your desktop audio isn't an audio input. And so you need to get a virtual audio cable to recognize the the input from like Google Voice as a kind of audio device, and so you can send it to Discord and then send it to the people in Discord so they can see it in a room. I think that's what you need to do.
Have you tried using a voice meter, where you can kind of decide what goes out on what output?
I think I tried that before for a while, but it was just too much work to do all of that and my stream at the same time.
The voice meter can be a little tricky.
Nope. Hey CJ, how's it going?
Hey, good. 60-second here. How are you guys doing?
All right.
I might be roboting here. I'm hoping I might have to restart my computer.
No, your mic sounds much clearer than our mics.
Wow. Yay, Amazon. Actually, I do have a quick question. It's a big if. It's what David brought up a while back about the idea of precognition or knowing something. If that was the case where humans could say predict something using some sort of psi phenomena type thing that's claimed, would that not implicate something about time not being tensed? Wouldn't that be, you could probably consider that some sort of evidence for like C time theory?
Say that again.
Like if we could say have some sort of, as humans, have some sort of precognition and predict something that's going to happen, and we could actually demonstrate that, would that not have like severe implications towards time not being tensed, or it being some sort of like C theory? I believe it's called C theory of time.
I don't think so. I don't think it would imply any of the particular models of time, because I think all of the different models of time could all have a universe where you can predict the future. So like,
how would that work?
Like determinism could be true. Say there's like necessitarianism, where everything, the only thing that could happen, there's only one possibility or whatever, and you just simply know the possibility, and so you can know what would happen in the future before it happens, and that would still be a tensed A theory of time where everything happens sequentially. So you wouldn't need a different model of time in order to predict the future.
Like predicting it as in you're not just predicting it based off of a hypothesis. You're like literally knowing,
Yep.
I don't know, lottery numbers before they happen or something.
Like necessitarianism is where there's only one possibility. Everything that happens necessarily happens. And so if necessitarianism is true, and you could have the knowledge of the future and know what it was, and so you'd know literally everything that could ever happen, and it wouldn't be a C theory of time, it'd be an A theory of time.
It'd still be A theory, but it would be sort of like you're like looking forward along the path.
Yep.
But it's still being created. Okay.
Yep.
Interesting.
Nostalgic Sounds asks, can you say that the golden rule is the same? Same about what? Say the same about the golden rule. I'm not sure. Well, let me know, Nostalgic. Let me know what you're referring to. Same what? Same what? Say the same. I do think I want one of those. Probably that would work better. Audio hijack or loop back. Those might work for the Google thing. Anybody else? Questions, comments, philosophy, politics stuff? Let me know. Go back and check the chat. No imposition of will. Treat others how you want to be treated. Well, so I think the golden rule is wrong, because the golden rule, it shouldn't be treat others as you want to be treated. It's treat others how they want to be treated. And so the golden rule is close, but the Hindu version from pre-Bible is better. The Hindu version is treat others how they want to be treated. And that would be more like the imposition of will thing, where it's do unto others as they would want you to do unto them, which is a better golden rule than do unto others as you would want them to do to you, because some people don't want to be treated the same way that you want to be treated. I think the way that the Bible phrases it is very selfish, because it's very much you decide for yourself how you want to be treated, and then you treat other people that way. It has some advantages, but it's definitely not as good as treat others how they want to be treated.
Yeah, what if you're a masochist? You like pain, so do that to other people.
Yep, exactly. It's clearly a troll name. You need non-troll names.
We've had a change of name.
There you go. Slightly less troll name.
Yeah, sorry, I had that because it's pretty low-hanging bait, and it's funny to get reactions out of people because it's a self-report if you complain about that. But so my questions about philosophy are: I'm really new to it, so how much do I have to hate myself, and where should I start?
You have to have a 7,005% self-hate level.
Shit, mine's only 6,000.
Yeah, it's fail. It's complete fail. And the best place to start is Hegel, because that will make you hate yourself even greater.
Wow, I didn't know that was possible.
Oh, reading Hegel, it makes anything possible.
It almost makes me want to crawl in a barrel or something. Live as a homeless man.
That's just the beginning. Stage 1.
So, actual question though is, why is it that the super religious types have to go through a bunch of philosophical hoops to say that God exists when they can't empirically prove it?
So confirmation bias starts. You have an ideology, you like the ideology, you look for evidence to try to confirm the ideology. They obviously can't find any empirical evidence to confirm the ideology, so they go with something else. Philosophy is well respected. There's different kinds of evidences in philosophy for philosophical arguments, so they try to use that well accepted basis of evidence to justify their God, because it's a well accepted basis of evidence. So anything that's cool, they're going to try to use it to justify their belief. Since they can't use science, they've tried. They're now stuck with philosophy because it's the closest thing to being reasonable. And
Okay, makes sense.
that's why they use philosophy.
Gotcha. It's kind of weird to me in that like I'm an empiricist, which I know has its faults.
Don't
more in the sense that
be an empiricist. Empiricism was
Yes, don't be an empiricist. That's like stupid.
I
You
can't help it. I'm
That's like
I'm
you
a
know
nerd,
why?
all right?
You know why? Because like you can't see atoms with a naked eye. Are you going to assume that atoms don't exist because you can't empirically prove them?
That is
That's
not why.
Yeah, but I don't have
Wait,
to.
yeah, that's not.
I don't
wait,
have to physically see it to know it's been observed before. Right?
Well, so you can direct observation is what Kimberly's talking about, and you in empiricism you don't need direct observation. You can have indirect observation. So if you can see the consequences of a thing, like neutrinos, where they pass through argon, they create bubbles. So you don't see the neutrinos, but because you see the consequences, you can still, via empiricism, justifiably believe in neutrinos because of indirect observation. One of the reasons that empiricism was irrational is because it states that empirical verification is the only way to gain true knowledge, which is false. There could be other
Logic.
ways. Well, no. So empiricism does grant
like divine revelation.
Well, empiricism does grant logic and analytic truths. It just doesn't state those as true knowledge because it defines true knowledge as correspondence to reality. The weakness of empiricism is that it doesn't accept the possibility that there's another kind of knowledge out there that we haven't discovered yet in the future that could also work. That's the weakness.
So I would push back on that and say that if it's found, the other way of acquiring knowledge, and then if that is presented with evidence, then it'll be accepted.
Sure.
Rationalism. Hello.
Well, so again, in empiricism, they grant that you can have conceptual knowledge, but they simply define knowledge as having to do with correspondence to reality. Conceptual knowledge doesn't. It's just a way to analyze things.
And which I don't stick too hard to labels. I think.
Well, that's why I'd say you're not a
labels.
true empiricist. I'd say that you probably grant the other stuff like logic and stuff too, and so you're not an empiricist in the classical sense, which I'm not either. I do grant that I tend to lean towards empirical verification as the most reasonable kind of ways to gain knowledge, but I wouldn't call myself an empiricist because of the baggage that ideology has, which I don't share.
Fair enough. Well, yeah, like with theists, for example, I have a very clear standard for what would make you believe in God. If you say a prayer and that prayer every time lights a candle, like that to me is easy enough to say, oh yeah, then I can definitely verify that God exists based on this. But you can't because
there are ways to prove God without using empiricism. I think empiricism just limits like the ways you can actually like find different like knowledge and truth.
So what would be those ways?
I'm not a theist, by the
well.
way, but I'm playing like devil's advocate. So one of the methods that I saw that like theists like to use is the Kalam cosmological argument, which basically states that in order for the universe to exist, there must be like something to create the universe, like, and that something, of course, is God.
Yeah, but this is just God of the gaps, though, right? Because just because we don't know what happened doesn't mean it's God.
Well, so
and I realize you're playing devil's advocate.
Well, so there's two versions of the Kalam. The first version is everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. The universe has a cause. Happy to grant that, but the cause is quantum fields, not God. So nothing in that part indicates a God. The second part of the argument, which is William Lane Craig's version, is that anything, the universe is all space and time. So whatever created the universe has to be outside of space and time. The only things that we know of that are outside of space and time is minds and abstract objects. And that's bullcrap. Complete bullcrap. There's no abstract objects outside of space and time. No evidence of minds outside of space and time. It's just some assumption, bullcrap assumption they've made. And they say, well, because of this, abstract objects have no causal powers. Therefore, the only option left is minds, which is false. Of course, there could be lots of other options. But either way, the second and third premise of that added part are complete garbage. So one, there's no evidence of minds outside of space and time. I mean, there's equivalent evidence for minds outside of space and time as there are for pineapples outside of space and time, which is zero.
Well, we wouldn't know if those minds existed. We can't like conceptualize those minds now, can we?
Well, it wouldn't matter if we could conceptualize them. What matters is there any evidence for it? So
wait, are you didn't? Sorry.
So what matters is what we do have evidence for outside of space and time is quantum fields. Quantum fields can exist outside of space and time just fine. Not abstract objects, not minds. So even if we granted this premise of William Lane Craig's version that whatever created the universe is outside of space and time, that would be a quantum field would be the best explanation, not a mind, and so God would be ruled out from the logical.
Yeah, I think you could maybe make an argument that the mind exists outside of time, but not both. Well, no, I'm not claiming this argument. I'm saying you could, in the sense that you could say like, oh well, your mind, if you're doing something that you like to do, time passes very quickly. If you're doing something you don't like to do, it passes very slowly. Therefore, your mind is manipulating the flow of time, even though it's a constant in a three-dimensional space.
Yeah, it also, like, if I shock you and knock you out and you're not gonna, like, with anesthesia, that makes time pass really fast. Do you think I've just manipulated the laws of physics, or do you think your brain is
Right.
stupid?
I think that's perception of time.
Yeah. No, don't get me wrong. I'm not
related
arguing
to
that. I'm just saying
brain
how we could
waves
try to
and
argue it.
brain chemistry that's altering our perception of time passing,
Yeah.
not the time itself.
Like
And I would
psychedelics
also
or drugs.
reject, going back to the Kalam, I rejected on the first premise, and that would be that the universe had a beginning, because we don't know whether or not really there was a beginning. So I don't think we know, do we?
Well, I think that's the consensus in physics is that our universe had a beginning. When theists use the argument, they imply all natural things, which nobody in physics agrees with. But so in that case, I would agree with you that there's no absolute beginning of everything. There is a beginning to our universe, which is what most people mean when they say universe, which is what makes the argument confusing.
Yeah.
So for the Kalam, oops, sorry.
I just wanted to ask a question. It's not really related to the topic, but kind of is. Is it okay?
Yes,
or
go ahead.
Should I just wait? Okay, so my question is, when we're debating if you're an atheist or agnostic or whatever, and you're debating someone who is Christian, you as an atheist, when debating, you're taking in question the validity of the Bible and God's existence, right?
Sure.
Why is it acceptable then, in a Christian's mind, for Christians to quote the Bible as the proof of God's existence when you're questioning the Bible? Like, it's not in that situation. It's not a proof of its existence. It's being questioned. And if you're quoting something that's being under question, it's not necessarily going to bring proof.
I wouldn't
Like, if you
agree with that. So, for example, if I'm questioning a physics book and I say, I think this physics book is wrong, and then we look at the physics book and the physics book says, if in the next 300 years, at this exact date, there's going to be an asteroid that comes, we wait and we see, oh, look, there's an asteroid. That would be confirmation of the truth of the physics book because it predicted the future. So, looking at the text and then using it to infer things about reality is totally fine. But obviously, you couldn't prove the text by just reading the text. You have to use something outside of the text to confirm it. That would be true. And many Christians,
they never do it.
well, they try, like prophecy. They try prophecy. They say after you die, you're going to go to heaven and see God and be judged. That would be great evidence if it happened. There's no evidence of it happening yet.
Yeah, but for example, I read this. These two researchers were beefing because one of them literally made up in his words, a very definitive theory on cryometro thing is like giant ice balls that fell out of the sky that had hundreds and hundreds of kilograms. And he said that it was something happening in the atmosphere with the moisture, blah, 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 even if it was on like a non-cloudy day, which is literally impossible. And he kept quoting his work, referring to his work, even though the work was being questioned by a meteorologist that has a PhD in meteorology that explained to him that it was not a thing. So I get the beliefs and I get the defense of it, but if we're questioning the validity of it, you quoting a Bible verse of what God apparently said. By the way, the God did not write the Bible; it was written by people.
Right. So if you're saying the Bible's wrong and they go to like Matthew something where it says everything in the Bible says is true, clearly that's stupid and that wouldn't be evidence.
It's an appeal to an unrecognized authority.
Yeah, but why do they take it as like such a hardcore evidence when like I find questioning, like let's say Twilight is a religion, I'm questioning the validity of Twilight being a religion. How are you gonna quote Twilight to me? Or Paradise Lost or The Divine Comedy or whatever other book, The Lord of the Rings.
Because it's what convinced them. So they were convinced by the Bible when they read it. It made them feel positive emotions. So they read it to you, hoping that it's going to cause you to feel positive emotions. So if it worked for them, they're going to try it on you. Clearly, it doesn't actually logically follow, and they're wrong about that when they think it does. But they feel good about it, and that's why they try it.
What about the insane amount of people that actually were born into like a religious family, went to like a Christian school and went to church and Sunday school and
Which is
youth group,
brainwashing.
etc., that actually read the Bible and lost their religion because they read it and did not agree with the material.
Yes.
Like, isn't
But they again, that's you're confusing the logic of the argument with the emotion of the argument. The theists use arguments because it makes them feel good. This verse made me feel good. That's why I believe. So I tell you the verse, hoping it will make you feel good. The logic isn't there for those arguments.
I mean, the lack of the logic in that for me is that how is their interpretation of the book that they read more right than my interpretation of the same book that I read?
Again, it's not about logic. It's about feelings. It makes them feel good. That's why they're quoting it.
Also,
Red
a second
Panda
thing.
are.
Sorry.
Oh, sorry, I was going to ask a question.
Oh yeah, of course.
Are you familiar with the concept of synchronisms?
Maybe in Serbian because
Okay, so a synchronism is when
I'm sorry.
something happens purely by random chance, but then that thing happening by random chance is associated with an outcome. So, like, a really easy example is like people that are really bad at chess will make a really bad move and say, "Oh, but look, this really bad move won me the game," and it was a totally unrelated thing that actually did that.
Okay.
I was going to tie into how a lot of people who find that faith go through a series of events where it's, oh, well, I saw this thing, therefore it must be God, when in reality it's something else entirely.
That reminds me to bring up like another thing over the thing that I wanted to say already. The thing that reminded me of is like, do you know when like people, like religious people, preach that they can heal like autism because they severely do not believe it's a genetic thing?
Yeah.
Like, how can you give them so much proof and they're still like, yep, no, no,
Because it's not about
God.
logic.
Because it's about feelings.
Second thing,
it's about how they feel.
And second thing, so you know how we have like different Christian factions, like for example, I'm Serbian, so I grew up in an Orthodox Christian country, studying and learning about like Orthodox Christianity. And yet, a few days ago in the Christian chat, I basically got insulted to hell and back. Even though both are Christian, right? I got insulted to hell and back how my version of Christianity that I grew up with is wrong, even though it's the same book. Different thing. We still believe in the same thing. We still have the same morals. We still strive for the same thing, like at the end to go to heaven. How is it wrong?
It's called a no true
So
Scotsman.
every religion has a thing. Yeah.
So no true.
Every
no true
religion has a thing
Scotsman.
that says my religion is correct.
So it's like if you just Google "no true Scotsman fallacy," it's what it says. You're not a true Scotsman if you don't like potatoes. Some arbitrary criterion that they think is important to differentiate that they are the real one and you're the fake one because they don't like you. It's in-group, out-group bias. So if you just Google "no true Scotsman fallacy" and look up the logical justification for it, there's none. It's just based off of they want to exclude Group A because they don't like Group A and make sure that they're not associated with Group A, and that's all they're doing.
All part of the tactics that apologists will employ to manipulate people into believing their ideology, because really the reality is that there's not really like evidence for God, so they either have to appeal to some old book that they're going to pass along to you as they're going to try to pass it as authoritative, or they're going to go the philosophy route because you can play that game without having to like show any real proof or like predictability or like you just can't demonstrate anything through philosophy. So that's how they play the game.
I think you can.
You can what?
I think there are ways you can like, I don't know. Well, it depends if you know the arguments, of course. Have you ever heard of tag?
Transcendental argument for God. Oh my God.
Yes, it's like well, I just want to see if anyone can actually refute it because like it's more white belt stuff. Like if you know it, you know it, but if you don't, like it's fine. Everyone learns it eventually. Basically, knowledge exists. In order for knowledge to exist, God exists. Conclusion: because knowledge exists, God exists. So how can you refute that?
It's what's it? Affirming the consequent fallacy. There are other ways for knowledge to exist without the conclusion being true. Therefore, it is does not follow. So it's like if saying the grass is wet. If the grass is wet, it must have rained. Therefore, it rained. no, it could have just been the sprinkler.
Yeah.
The sprinkler could have done that. And so the tag argument is doing the same kind of fallacious reasoning where it says that the only way for knowledge to come about is God, which is false. Knowledge can come about in other ways, and therefore the argument is begging the question.
Right. Some people could say that it's circular reasoning.
Well, I don't think it's circular, so because the tag is valid. It's like for knowledge to exist, God must exist. Knowledge exists, therefore God exists. It's perfectly, if P then Q, P therefore Q. Perfectly fine.
Yes. Premise, conclusion, yeah. You mostly see like Darth Dawkins acolytes do this shit, so yeah. I just wanted to see if like
Are
people
we
knew
just
it.
assuming that God is knowledge? Like, why does that have to constitute a God?
Well, so their justification is
Because
more that in order for you to
he's
have
omnipotent.
well, no, that part's less important. What matters is that for knowledge to have knowledge, you need absolute 100% certainty. It can't be wrong, and the only way for knowledge to not be wrong is if you have a perfect, omniscient, all-powerful mind who did everything, and that's the only way for you to ever be justified in believing anything. And they're just wrong. You don't need 100% certainty for knowledge, and you can have that without a God anyway. Like I think, therefore I am, I exist, and so they're just wrong.
Yeah.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So I mean, was that? I'm sorry, Kimberly. Was that refuted though? Like, is that?
No. It was just
that?
I was just playing devil's advocate just to see if people actually can refute tag. So like a lot of like white belts can't deal with like Darth Dawkins like tag shit. So it's actually funny at first, but then after a while it's like, oh my god, you can clearly see it's right in front of you and you can't refute it. You're so embarrassing. That's why.
So Daddy, did you want to ask a question, or who was it? Who was just go ahead.
Because I listened to Tom Rabbit Tom Rabbit's recording of Dawkins, and it seems to me that a lot of people fall into the trap of like trying to refute the metaphysics instead of engaging in moral arguments about the Christian God. I feel like it's. I don't think it's a weak argument to engage in morality about the Christian God. Like, give them the Christian God, whatever.
Yeah,
just
but if
attack the morality of the Christian God.
Well, I think
morality is emotional.
One sec.
Engaging in morality just makes you emotional.
Stop.
Shut the fuck up.
So it depends what your goal is. Like my goal in addressing those arguments is to address the arguments as they're presented. Addressing the morality is a different topic. So you can do that. You can say, well, here's this other problem that your God has, which is this moral problem that drowned lots of babies. And so clearly it's not moral, but that wouldn't be addressing their argument. So if you want to steelman their position, you have to address what they're actually trying to say. And so you could take the route of attacking a weaker part of their ideology, like the morality or whatever, but I like to try to attack the strongest position that they like the best, which is their tag argument or whatever. And I find it more entertaining to attack what they consider to be their strongest argument rather than to divert to an easier thing to attack.
Sure.
Another very important thing when you're debating morality of God with Christians, they're always gonna pull the shit, oh well, he's on a higher plane of existence than you, how do you know, etc.
Well,
and then you can pull the Bible verse from Genesis 22 to 24. And basically God said the humans have eaten the fruit of knowledge of good and evil, and they have gained the knowledge of good and evil like us, as in him and the angels. And then he said we should cast them out so they don't eat the fruit from the tree of life, which is going to give them eternal life. Meaning that all our morality, even if God exists, all our morality is based on what is good and what is good and what is bad, which we gained from eating the fruit. And if we see something as bad, like for example, I don't know, statutory rape, right? You can't really refute that because we build the morality, the knowledge of good and bad that we have gained from eating the fruit. But they, again, even if you present them with that, which is a very logistical argument pulled from their own book, they're still gonna bring the fallacy. Oh, you don't understand his greater mind, his greater plane of existence, his omni everything, and they're just gonna spin you in circles.
I think I've misrepresented my initial question in a sense. So when I argue with them, I can give them their God, but argue from the standpoint that their God is abhorrent and disgusting to me, to my morality, to my moral framework. Because the idea of the Christian is to convince me that God exists, right? And if I
quantum theory is
attack him
incompatible with
within
moral
my
language, so.
within my moral framework, bro, I can talk to Darth, and when he asks me, God does not exist, because I can say God exists, but it's a repulsive being. I would never worship.
So yeah, that's when they
Because
that's
of
when they
this and this
say
reason.
like, what's your standard of morality? Because they think God is the objective standard, and so if you saying God is immoral, you have to have some kind of other standard to judge God, right?
Yeah, my standard, and I can lay it out, right? I can
And where did you
carefully
get your
explain.
standard from?
So
What I derived it from
the question
nature,
the question
the
is going to
universe.
be more like, you can make up any standard you want. Like you can make up a system of language like English or whatever. But if you're trying to say that there's a truth claim there, that your standard of morality is true, and so the fact that God is abhorrent makes him false or not deserving of worship, it's a truth statement. And for that to be a truth statement, it has to correspond to reality in some way, in which case your moral beliefs have to correspond to reality. And so you need a standard outside of yourself in order to gauge that when you're saying God is abhorrent, it's not just your opinion, but it is actually a truth claim about reality, because there's something in reality to establish that this is objectively abhorrent. And if you can't do that, then it's just your opinion, at which point they don't care anymore.
Well, no, obviously I would say like things like human evolution, human empathy, human psychology, like all these things build up my morality, obviously.
And they're still gonna
Yeah, that's
pull the
just having like
card
an
for the
evolutionary kind of
morality.
morality. It's not like disproving God's standard.
So Apollo is correct here
So-
that would be a subjective standard from the theist perspective, and so that would be no different than just kind of making up your own language. And so from them, in order to claim that God was immoral objectively, you wouldn't be able to say it's just an evolutionary basis of morality. You need something greater than that to say that there's actually like a moral realist position of some kind that would establish God as immoral. Because if you're just using an evolutionary standpoint, that would be a moral anti-realist position where it's just subjective or socially constructed or whatever.
Sure. No, I understand. I'm a moral.
Unless you want to say that your model of
think
morality
it's so
maps onto moral language better or explains intuitions better or something like that. But yeah.
Sure. Thanks.
Anybody else not get a chance to talk yet? Who is set up? So like,
Yeah.
Shouldn't
Alright, what's your stance on the penalty?
on what? Definity?
The death penalty.
The death penalty? Justified immoral action. So it's immoral to kill anyone ever for any reason, but it can be justified under certain cases. I think America's is stupid.
What certain cases would those be?
Where it would save more lives if we killed them than if we didn't.
Okay.
Like asking, would you kill Hitler when he was a baby?
It would be immoral to do so, but it would be pragmatic. So I would probably do it, even though it was immoral.
It's utilitarian if you think about it.
Yeah.
That's crazy. But what's his name? Do you think situations like those are like likely to happen within society or not?
Yes, they literally happen.
Where you have to kill.
Yes, they literally happen all the time. So like,
can you give me an example?
So like, one example would be assassinating the leaders of certain countries. So like certain countries, they have a military, so you're not going to be able to just put him in prison. And the only way to stop him is to like to send in an assassin to kill him. And then that's the only way to stop his reign of terror. So you have the option of killing him or letting him run the country and killing people. So it's a justified immoral action to kill him in that case.
Yeah, but that's like that's just in the case of like an assassination. I'm talking about in the case of like a typical death penalty, when you sentence someone to death, and they're like, has there ever been a case of where you sentence someone to death and like it benefits more people than it harms? Because I just believe it's a waste of money. It doesn't like wait. It doesn't It doesn't decrease the amount of like of criminals there are in the world. It simply just like wastes money on like to remove these prisoners or to kill them, but it doesn't actually address why they are there, if you get what I mean.
Right. So like America's death penalty is kind of garbage. It's just a waste of money. I would agree with you. There are many death penalties in many countries where it is justified because they don't have reliable prisons. So the person could get out, kill more people. They can kill people in prison. There's lots of ways that they can cause harm after they're captured, in which case you just kill them to be safe. So like this happens with terrorists, with drug lords, etc., where they get into prison, they buy their way out, or they use legal like lawyers to get them out, and killing them in those cases because they have a means to get out of prison would be a justified immoral action to prevent further harm that they could do to society.
Okay.
if there's,
why do you think killing them in that situation would be immoral? Then?
it wouldn't. It would be killing anyone for any reason ever is immoral. Always, any involuntary imposition of will is immoral.
Why?
Because that's what objective morality is.
Wait, okay, you think what's this is? So are you a Christian?
If you want to
okay, yeah.
check out the churchofthebestpossibleworld.org, and you can see in the objective morality section a whole entire description of what objective morality is.
Yeah, okay, I got you.
TJ, I got a question.
Sure, go for it.
Okay.
Do you think your model of morality fully or properly captures moral agents' intuitions and the language you use accordingly with morality?
I think that's a contradiction. So moral intuitions are subjective, kind of like sight. Like if you're trying to build a model of sight that captures everyone's sight, you're not going to have a correct model because people's sight isn't based on photons. It's based on how your brain interprets the photons. So how everyone's personally interprets the data is irrelevant. You don't need to encapsulate that at all. So no, you don't need to encompass all moral intuitions. You just need to find what the pattern in moral intuitions is, regardless of if there are.
Let me just talk about all moral intuitions, right? Like, for example, there are certain words that we use in language, and like
same thing.
When you use these words, we're obviously representing these concepts.
Same thing. So again, the subjective usages or subjective interpretations of intuitions and word uses do not matter at all. What matters is the overarching patterns in those things. Same with vision. So like if there's lots of people who
I heard you, my bad. Someone talked to me.
Okay. But yeah, so the same thing like vision. Some people are blind, some people see an extra fourth color because they have an extra fourth cone. And our current
I get what you're saying.
Current usages of language don't accurately describe the fourth cone because we can't see it. And so does that mean that our current because the fourth cone isn't described by our language means that it's not true vision? Well, no, it is true vision. It's real vision. But because our language
agree with this, right? You agree that when we say this, like
our language is wrong.
You agree that when we say like X is objective or subjective, it's mind dependent or mind dependent. We try to like cash out the concept, right? We try to understand what is X really representing, and then from there on, we try to approach the situation by saying, okay, X is Y. We understand X by this concept. Now, is this concept mind independent or is mind dependent? And if it's so, what's the evidence for it being mind independent or it being mind dependent? We have to cash out the concepts first. And I'm saying after cashing out the concept of good and bad, how does it lead towards realism?
So again, that's
not incorrect.
It is incorrect, and we have definitive proof that's incorrect because of how we apply that in reality. So one of the best examples is space and time. Einstein said time could bend. Philosopher said, no, we cashed out the concept of time. Time is a philosophical thing. It literally can't bend. It's abstract. Einstein says, you're dumbasses. Here are my novel predictions. You fail. So how we apply the concepts may just be wrong. And so our concepts have to be catered to reality, not the other way around. We don't define the concept and then try to find a way it applies to reality. We try to make a concept that refers to a phenomenon in reality, and then whatever's causing that phenomenon governs what we have to make the concept. We don't make the concept try to apply to reality.
Okay, so in the Einstein example, there's going to be some trivial agreement regarding what time is. But the thing is that Einstein isn't necessarily
there's no trivial
fundamental. Wait.
I want to disagree with the trivial part there. There's no trivial part there. The agreement of what time is the phenomenon, what's actually occurring in reality, some kind of passage or transition of something that we see. So it starts with a
yes, I understand.
It's not trivial. That's the most important part. The most important part is
not what I'm
phenomenon.
Talking about.
Okay, go ahead.
But you already misinterpreted what I'm saying. I'm talking about the fact that there's like going to be a trivial account of like time, which is agreed upon by both parties. But then Einstein disagrees with them because of the empirics. The empirics contradicts their idea of what time is and whatever. Like he uses time dilation experiments, yada yada yada. These things lead in favor of his theory being correct, right? That's not going to be something where he's talking about or he's critiquing necessarily their concept of time or the essential features of time when they talk about the word time. He's trying to just contradict certain empirical, or he's trying to use empirical data to contradict some other, I guess you could say, contingent properties that they assign to time itself as a concept.
Yeah, but those are the same thing. Why? Like that's the same thing.
No.
Wait, so if they have a concept of time which has some extraneous properties that aren't really there, and he's critiquing those extraneous properties, saying those aren't entailed in the definition or the concept, or they should not be entailed in the definition or concept of time. He is now critiquing their conceptual view of time. He's saying, no, that's wrong. So he is specifically taking
I'm pretty sure.
their concept and saying this is wrong because there's extra properties, which is exactly what I'm doing with morality.
Do you think Einstein is claiming that from the concept of time it's entailed that his theory is correct, or is he just going based on the data that he has access to?
No, he's saying that his concept of time is correct because of the predictions, and their concept of time is incorrect because of the predictions.
And I'm asking you, when he's making this claim about his concept of time being correct or incorrect, is that an analytic statement or a synthetic claim?
Be closer to synthetic, so it's correspondent to reality, not a priori. A priori truth claims are irrelevant; they're just garbage.
And do you think the scientists are making an analytic claim or a synthetic claim?
The scientists, all the physicists agree with Einstein. They think time can physically bend. There is no philosophical time. That's a garbage concept that was done away with.
I'm talking about the people who, like you said, Einstein disagreed with originally. Are you saying that they're making synthetic claims or analytic claims?
Most likely analytic claims. I would have to talk with them more, but they're probably analytic descriptions of what time is based on the definition or concept alone.
Yeah, I don't even agree that they would be making analytic claims. In fact, if they're to be making analytic claims, that'd be like so fucking absurd, considering that there's no logical contradiction in someone believing that time can bend and still adopt like the mainstream definition of fucking time, right? So I wouldn't even say they're like making like some analytic claim, because that's gonna be a really strong claim that's almost untenable. It's indefensible, right?
Possibly, but no, that's not actually the case. So they think that, like, if time is a Platonic object, a Platonic concept that encompasses any kind of transition or change, that's what they're talking about. I think time is this philosophical concept of any kind of change or transition. And so it is an analytic claim in those kinds of contexts. They're just wrong. Anybody else? Precept King, did you get a chance to talk yet? War Chief, did you get a chance to talk yet?
Nah. Actually, to be honest, I want to know: are you a theist, atheist? Like, what's
Atheist.
your theological perspective?
100% atheist.
Atheist. So you haven't heard any arguments that convince you in particular?
I'm a strong atheist, so I think God does not exist. I think that all the arguments fail objectively to provide any evidence for God whatsoever.
So you do know about like the standard Kalam cosmological argument, right?
Everything that begins to exist has a cause. The universe began to exist. The universe has a cause, which is quantum fields, not a God.
We actually interestingly just discussed this earlier too.
Yep.
Yeah, okay, precisely. So is your answer that the Kalam cosmological argument only proves the existence of like a quantum fields and not something of like intelligence or agency?
Yeah, sort of. So there's no evidence to indicate that an intelligence or a mind can exist outside of space-time.
Yeah, so from my understanding of like quantum physics, I'm not too knowledgeable, but quantum fields are like waves, I believe, and like when the wave kind of like gyrates or oscillates, it causes like quantum particles. Is that like a correct understanding?
Waves are an analogy. They're fluctuations, but so it's not an actual wave. It's a fluctuation.
And so then what would your basis be for saying that these quantum fields don't have causes? Is it because we haven't observed one yet?
There's no evidence to indicate they have a cause. They're the most fundamental thing, and they're the closest thing to a form of energy, so it corresponds to the first law of thermodynamics. To say that it has a cause would be irrational, just like to say that quantum fields were caused by a pineapple. There's no reason to think that, because pineapples are a result of quantum fields, just like minds and brains are.
Yeah, so I understand that quantum fields, as we understand now, to be the most fundamental form of like, or the most smallest, obviously quantum small, yeah. They're extremely small, fundamental, etc., etc. But would you disagree with me saying inductively, since we've observed everything else to have like a sufficient reason or like explanation or cause for its existence, would it not be fair to apply the same reasoning to quantum fields?
You can use the inductive reasoning to infer there might be a cause, but until you actually have a reason to think that, then the answer is no, because of the first law of thermodynamics, energy can't be created or destroyed.
Yeah, within an isolated system, would you not agree that if like the cause is external to the system, then
no.
Can still hold
it's energy can't be created or destroyed, period. The isolated system is for the second law of entropy.
Oh, I see. Okay, that's my misunderstanding. So the law as commonly understood is just that energy in itself just cannot be created or destroyed.
Right. Yep.
All right, cool. Okay, I understand your refutation. That's cool. That's what I really wanted to say. Just see your refutations to the Kalam.
Yep. So my
Also,
main
actually,
criticism of the Kalam is that, like William Lane Craig's version, the second half of the Kalam is that whatever created the universe has to be outside of space and time. The only things that are outside of space and time are minds and abstract objects. Abstract objects can't cause anything, therefore it's minds. So the second premise there's no evidence minds exist outside of space-time. Zero, none, or abstract objects. No evidence of that either. There is evidence quantum fields exist outside of space and time. And so to say the best candidate explanation of what caused the universe is quantum fields, and the best candidate explanation of an uncreated thing is quantum fields. And if you want to say a mind or intentionality is, it's no different than saying a pineapple is. There's just no evidence of that whatsoever.
Yeah, I understand that, but like here's my thought process. So like back to like how quantum fields were explained with these waves or just these things, the fundamental part of the universe. I don't understand how anything can be caused about something external acting upon it. Do you know what I mean? Like how can something just come from nothing? Because obviously the quantum fields exist, but would there not have to be something external that would cause these quantum fields to like move or gyrate?
It's a part of their fundamental nature, so there's nothing external to them, and there's never a nothing, never an absolute nothing.
Oh, so you don't agree with the notion that nothing can exist?
Right. I don't think there could ever be an absolute nothing. Sabine Hofstetter did a really good video on this, on what the different definitions of nothing. There's the final definition of nothing, and absolute nothing could never exist. No.
When you say absolutely nothing, are we just saying the absence of all properties?
Well, that would be like I think the 7th level of nothing. There's like 9 levels of nothing, and so an absolute nothing is nothing exists, no space, no time, no quantum fields, and no possibility of any of those things, and no properties.
I see. So what would be the contradiction in saying that these things can exist?
Well, because if there was an absolute nothing, which included the no possibility of anything happening, then there couldn't be anything that existed now, and something does exist now, which means there could have never been a point where there was a nothing that included no possibility of anything else happening. Because if that did exist, then there couldn't be anything after it.
Okay, I understand what you mean about like in a possible. Are you saying that this is like an impossible thing or something that can't be the case in our world?
It can't be the case in our world.
Oh, okay, but like in another possible world, would you agree that nothing could possibly exist?
Well, if I don't know if you could call that another possible world, because it wouldn't exist by definition, and there'd be no possibility of that world existing by definition. But sure, we could say that's a thing that might not exist. It's somewhere.
Yeah, and what's your opinion on the teleological argument? If you're
fine-tuning argument has 2 major problems. The first major problem is the definition of fine-tuning, saying that something of some level of complexity or whatever requires a designer to create that because of the low probability. So like say that our universe has a 1 in a billion chance of being life permitting, and so there must have been something that created that to set it to the 1 in a billion option. Well, what of the thing that designed the universe, it must have been fine-tuned to the same degree, because each one of the possible ways the universe could be, there could be a designer who could have been predetermined to make that universe. So for all 1 billion possibilities, there could be a designer who wanted that possibility. And so the designer must have been equally as fine-tuned as the design to select it for life permitting properties. So the designer must have been pre-designed to make a life permitting universe, because if the designer had been any different, he would have made a non-life permitting universe, like a black hole universe or a neutron universe or a potato universe or whatever. And so the same argument for fine-tuning applies to the God, and you have to say that there's something in the God's nature that would cause him to specifically make a life permitting universe, and that must have been fine-tuned.
Why does it have to be necessarily fine-tuned? Why couldn't I make the argument that, God decided, like obviously I believe God acts from eternity, if you know what I mean by that, but from like eternity, God made the decision to actualize the universe in a certain way, in a certain form, and this is like something that's eternal and intrinsic to him. Why does it have to be fine-tuned from something external to himself?
Because the definition of fine-tuning is that there's a whole bunch of possibilities, right? And only a small percentage of those have some property, life permitting or whatever. And I could say that, well, maybe there's some determining force in the universe that caused it to be fine-tuning, like the fine structure constant, which causes all the different laws to be intertangled so that if you change one, they all change proportionally, and therefore life is necessary. But then you would ask, well, why is that law the way it is and not some other way? It could be different, right? Why isn't the fine structure constant such that it would produce only black holes? Why is it on this life permitting constant? Because there's a whole bunch of possibilities. Why is it on this one possibility? But the same thing applies to God's mind and his decisions. What if God was the type of person who only wanted black holes? Well, that would be the same problem, because now you're saying that God is this way where he wants a life permitting universe, and he's not this other way where he wants only black holes. So his personality has to have some fine tuning where it has equally as many possibilities as the kinds of universes. So for every possible kind of universe, there's a possible way God's mind could be where he would want that kind of a universe. So a universe of only black holes, universe of nothing, a universe of only neutrons, universe of only stars, a universe with life, a universe with just puppies or whatever. So for every possible way the universe could be, there's a possible way God could be where he would want each one of the possible universes. But he didn't. He picked the life permitting one. Why? Why is it that kind of a God that wants the life permitting universe and not one of the infinitely many other kinds of gods that wants a black hole permitting universe?
So typically the response I get from theists is that God is necessary and there's no other possible way God could be.
Right.
But I think that kind of undermines their own argument, because that means that nothing is designed or fine-tuned, because there is no other possible way that the universe could be if God is necessary.
Sort of, yeah.
At least the mode collapse is what I'm saying.
Well, so War Chief, did that make sense that if you're claiming the universe is fine-tuned because there's a whole bunch of ways the universe could be and only a small number is life permitting, the same thing applies to God because there's a whole number of ways God could be where he would want each of the different kinds of universes, but he only wants the life permitting one. And so there must be some factor that designs God in such a way that he's this one that wants a life permitting universe. Let me know if that made sense. Anyway, anybody else questions, comments? Anybody else not get a chance to speak yet?
I have a kind of a parody of the presuppositional argument.
Sure.
That if God exists, then we cannot have knowledge.
Okay.
So the problem with their knowledge system is it's a revelatory-based system. It's based on God revealing knowledge to them. So God could either be deceiving them, or he could change the state of affairs without their knowledge. So therefore, they wouldn't have any justification. So they wouldn't have any knowledge. I got this idea from, like, have you seen Bruce Almighty?
A long time ago.
You know,
but I wanted to, so in your argument, if there is a God who is a great deceiver God, then obviously it would be impossible for knowledge to exist. But their definition of God is a God who is not a great deceiver, only tells the truth, and is omniscient. And so if there's a God who only tells the truth and is omniscient and is telling you stuff, then you have knowledge. And that's the only way knowledge is possible, is if you have all of those properties. Obviously, if you change one of those properties, they're going to say, well, there's no knowledge, clearly. So if you define God differently than they do, they're going to agree with you and say, yeah, there's no knowledge in that way. What you would need to say is the God they believe in would have to be a great deceiver or something. Or
so that's what I would try to prove based on that. Like, I would say that if God is not a deceiver, then he's not omnipotent and can't do all things.
I don't think they would say knowledge isn't possible. I think it'd be knowledge isn't justified.
Well, what I was thinking is, like, in that scene from the Bruce Almighty,
true belief is unjustified.
Well, so
yeah, he has
it to clarify precept.
So
knowledge itself is not like a specific knowledge.
Knowledge is a justified true belief. So if it's not justified, it's by definition not knowledge.
Right. So my example,
I'm talking about a justification for how knowledge could exist. That's That's what it's about. It's not so like you can still have knowledge and stuff.
No, you
but,
can't.
Okay,
you can't
so
have knowledge if it's
can
not
we?
justified. If it's not justified, it's by definition
That's
not
true.
knowledge.
You're not getting what I'm saying.
Yeah.
No,
Okay,
he's talking
so
about the
let's go
justification
through
for
this.
the.
Can
He's
I?
talking about the justification for the existence of knowledge, not knowledge itself being unjustified, like a justified true
No,
belief being unjustified.
I'm saying we don't have access to knowledge if God exists. So like if everybody knows that Abraham Lincoln is dead, but it could be possible that God resurrected Abraham Lincoln 30 seconds ago without us being aware. So if God can change the state of affairs and he's all powerful, he could change what happened in the past, just like in that Bruce Almighty scene where he had his hand behind his back and he's like, guess how many fingers I'm holding up? And God's like 5. So he pulls his hand around to show him and he's like, or no, God said 7. And he pulls his hand around to show him 5 fingers. He's like, aha. And he looks at his hand and his hand had 2 extra fingers without Bruce's knowledge. So if God can change the state of affairs like that, how can we really have justification for anything outside of like, we know that we exist?
How does the possibility of God changing the state of affairs in any way invalidate or justifiability towards believing that knowledge exists? I don't see the implication there.
Well, we wouldn't have justification.
If it is possible, this is your condition. If it is possible that God can change the state of affairs, then that means we're unjustified in belief that knowledge exists. How is this a true implication?
No, we're not unjustified in our belief that knowledge exists. We're unjustified in the beliefs we hold about the universe the beliefs we hold about the state of affairs.
If we're unjustified in our beliefs, then that means we cannot have knowledge because knowledge requires justification.
Exactly. That's what I'm
saying. So if that is the case, then that means an entailment of what you're saying is that under your view, whereas God can change the state of affairs, we're unjustified in believing in the existence of knowledge. It's not hard.
So like I think
there probably are things you couldn't. I would say like you would know that you exist.
Well, wait, so I think Apollo has a point here that even if God could change the fact that you know, does that make your belief unjustified? Well, if you define justification as 100% certainty, then yes, obviously that would make it unjustified, because if God has a chance of changing it, then there's not 100% certainty this fact is true. And so it wouldn't be knowledge by the definition of having 100% certainty requirement. But if you don't require 100% certainty, then it wouldn't make a difference if God could change it. Even if he could change it, you still have some justification that isn't 100% of this fact. So it wouldn't matter if he could change it.
It would also change the truth of the belief, though, not just the justification.
Well, the truth part doesn't make a difference.
That
so like
he changed the state of exactly.
So like I can
if knowledge is justified true belief, if the belief is not true and God changed it so it never was true and you always had 7 fingers.
It's only under the condition of God acting upon this desire. We're saying that generally speaking, if I have a belief, for example.
So again, knowledge is a justified true belief, but you never have access to the true part. The truth part is a fact of the universe that's outside of you entirely. So if you have a belief the world is round, God went back and changed it, then it was never knowledge. It was never knowledge that you had. Even if you had a justification and the justification was lots of empirical data and you had some kind of probability of, say, 98% justification the world is round, and God went back and changed it, you have no knowledge. It's just a fact. It would still be a justified belief. It just wouldn't be a justified true belief. Say it was true that the world was round and God could change it. God could go back and change it. You still have a 98% justification that the belief the world is round, and it happens to be true the world is round. So now you have knowledge. Even if God could go back and change it, you still have knowledge that the world is round.
No, but that justification wouldn't be 98% justified. God changed it so it never was. So
no. If God changes it, that's irrelevant. It's now no longer knowledge, no matter what your justification is. It doesn't make a difference. The truth part is irrelevant. What matters is the justification part. If you have a 98% justification, and that justification is of a belief the world is round, whether or not God can change it makes no difference. Has zero impact at all. None.
May I respond? All that would change is it would change from the world is round to the world was round. That's all that would change.
If God went back in time and changed it all the time, then it's never.
He went back in time, sir.
Never round. Yeah, but that it makes no difference to the argument. So let's say God could do this. God could do this. So I have a belief the world is round. I have a justification based off of science the world is round, and it is round. So I have knowledge. Now, God could go back in time and make it not round. But right now, since he has not done that, I still have knowledge. His ability to go back in time and make it not round means I don't have 100% certainty that it's round, because he has the ability to change it. But I still have a justification and I have a belief, I have a justification. Therefore, if it's true right now that the world is round, I have knowledge. Whether or not it's true is irrelevant. If it's true, I have knowledge. If it's not true, I don't have knowledge. But if it's true, I have knowledge.
Okay.
Even if God could go back and have changed it and I wasn't aware of this.
Okay, so what you're saying is that, like, if I were requiring 100% justification, then this would work.
Yeah.
And I started out saying that this was a parody of a presuppositionalist argument, which is what they usually require. So I was kind of trying to turn this around on them to say how they're always like, well, how do you know anything is true at all if you can't know anything? You don't know everything, you can't know anything. That's
right. So
that's just.
I guess this is where it fails in the same.
Right. So I would agree with your.
The magic of knowledge of precepts usually go under is like the Cartesian account, which is like, well, you have to like prove this beyond the reasonable doubt or prove this is 100% certain. But obviously, this is not going to be compatible with like a lot of epistemic agents, a kind of knowledge where it just goes based off probabilistic justification, leading towards some truth track and fact of the matter. Really.
Right. That's why we reject
so it's really, really.
But that's. I wanted to go back to what I originally said, which is that. The precept argument is that if you have a God, by their definition, and their definition entails must be always telling the truth and be all powerful and be all knowing, then knowledge is possible. So if you change one of that and you say, well, what if God's lying to you? That's a different God. And it's like, okay, yeah, we grant that if that's the case, there's no knowledge, but that's not what we care about. All we care about is if there is a God by this definition, knowledge, that's the only way knowledge is possible. And by their definition, it must entail always tells the truth, is a part of their definition.
Okay. I guess I was trying to prove or attempt to prove that by their definition of being all powerful, all knowing, and all the omnis, that entails deception, and that even in the Bible it shows places where God does deceive.
Right. So then I would say that's a different kind of argument you're making. You're trying to make a contradiction in the properties of God argument, saying that your definition of a God has this contradiction that it's all power or omnipotent, which means it can do anything, which would include lying. Therefore, that would be in contradiction with your first property, which it always tells the truth. And so you have a contradiction between the all powerful and the perfectly moral property. But I don't think that would be a parody of their tag argument.
Right. Okay.
T-Jump.
Yeah.
Do you think certain neurological processes can be as a result of not only mental states, but also things which are extra mental?
I don't know what that means.
Extra mental just means something outside the mind,
no, I know
right?
what
So I'm saying that do you believe that our mind can be?
So, like, I think that everything that is in your mind happened from something outside of your mind. I'm a physicalist, so I think that the physical processes that are not in your mind cause the things that are in your mind.
Okay.
It's like asking, could a thing that is in a map be contingent on things which are represented by the map? Of course, a map is not the territory, right? So in the same way that your mind is a representation machine that predicts the state of the outside world, of course, the outside world is shaping it. In cognitive science, it's called the embodied and extended consciousness hypotheses, which are pretty prevalent, saying that your whole nervous system of your body and the extended environment around you is essential to the formation of your cognitive faculties. If you grew up in one of those weightless chambers where you don't feel anything, what do they call them? Sensory deprivation tanks or whatever. Like, you wouldn't really develop most of the cognitive abilities you need to survive because you wouldn't have the stimuli to develop them. All of your brain structures are developed in response to the physical environment they're designed, or I should say, entrained to be able to predict.
Oh, Roby asked in the comments if my Twitch account is banned. No, my Twitch account is not banned. I just changed the title It's not T-Jump anymore. It's Church of the BPW. So still there, just changed to Church of the BPW, not T-Jump. All right, anybody else?
Hey, that was well said, X. I just simply wanted to add maybe the possibility of some things that we have inherited, like from an evolutionary perspective, like things like face recognition patterns and stuff like that, that our brains have evolved to like better understand our reality.
Sure. What was that about?
That I'm simply adding that onto what you said.
Okay.
So anybody?
Yeah, we have faculties that are innate, like color recognition. There's like an innate like color palette basically in the brain of neurons that we can map and like see them light up when you look at red, green, blue, etc. They look pretty much like an RGB palette just with neurons. So there are innate structures, but most of what we are able to do is a learned behavior that we get from the environmental stimuli that we predict.
All right, so any of the people I just let up, did you have any comments?
I think that I think the mind is like we still don't know a lot about the mind. It's still like we haven't reverse engineered a lot of it. Like where we're at, and this is just my opinion, is that imagine if I like took a time machine and I brought like a modern day computer with me to like the early 20th century, and like I just dumped it there, and then like had the people try to like reverse engineer it in the early 20th century. That's kind of like where we're at with like the mind.
Sure.
We still have no idea like.
It's sort of analogous because in the 1830s, Ada Lovelace basically theorized like what the Babbage engine or the analytic engine would be able to do. She asked the question, could it think original thoughts? She said only if it had some like source of unpredictable behavior that wouldn't be just deductively guaranteed by the initial conditions. And when Turing formalized it, essentially we got kind of the state that we're at with neurons, where we understand the formal structure the brain is made out of, and we've reverse engineered successfully to get it to do analogous things in an artificial form. What we don't know is exactly how the software is written, but it's like having the hardware manual, but not the software manual. We don't know how Windows works, but we do know how the Intel chip works.
Well, I think his analogy is actually perfect. So like if we took a computer, say from 100 years in the future and brought it back to now, that would essentially be like taking what we have with our brain. It is essentially just a computer from the future that we have now. We just have no idea how it works. That's essentially what it is.
Well, we have as much idea now about how the brain works as Ada Lovelace, Babbage, and Turing had about how computers were going to work for the foreseeable future. Yeah. And nothing has changed in that respect. We're still using universal Turing machines, von Neumann machines, etc. They just happen to be, 3 nanometer and have really good software. The part that we haven't decoded is the software. The software is like 99% of what's interesting about the brain, and that's going to take a lot more work. But the fact is that we can reproduce software that does analogous things with a totally different basis, like LLMs. They're not the same as the brain at all, but they use the same hardware schema that the brain does.
All right, who else had a question? SVX on.
Hey there. Just a quick one about the future potential to be able to see things in a new way, changes and understanding of things that today are paradoxes. Have you guys talked about, sorry, I was a bit late, so I don't know if you talked about some interesting things like Zeno's paradox with the tortoise and the hare or something.
Yep.
But essentially, for about 1,000 years, there was a paradox of existence that the discovery of calculus suddenly removed the paradox. So in the future, there theoretically could be maths that allow us to understand things today that we think are beyond understanding.
Yes, absolutely. We talked about an example of that previously with time bending. So philosophers thought time as a philosophical concept literally could not bend. It's abstract. It can't physically bend. Einstein was like, nope, you guys are idiots. It's literally a physical thing and it can physically bend. Here's the predictions, confirmed the predictions with experiment. Like, yeah, philosophers were dumb and time is physical.
As time passes, science is something that it finally accepts that the dumbasses that totally believe things in the past have died.
Yep.
a good example of that is surgeons denying the idea that washing hands between surgeries was anything but a dumb idea because you lose your magic powers.
Yep, the Jesus belief.
And the last thing I was going to ask TJ, because it is, I've got some family and friends who are members of the Church of the Subgenius,
Yeah.
which has an interesting perspective, which is they deny the existence of their God implicitly.
Yep. What about it?
Just, I don't know, threw that out there as a alternate to understanding the potential for
I started my own religion, the
life.
Church of the Best Possible Worlds, based on my model of objective morality, which is the best possible world. The perfect moral world is a world where it would be impossible to force anyone to do anything they don't consent to doing. Check out churchofthebestpossibleworld.org. You can read all of my morality there. So
I'm a maximal consentalist as well.
Yes. Subscribe to the Church of the Best Possible Worlds. Become a pastor. Start your own church.
Sounds good. I'll check it out. Thank you very much. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for coming up. Anybody else?
My pleasure.
Questions, comments?
Yeah. Hi.
Hey.
So on the heels of that last thing, I'm actually Discordian Pope. But yeah, Church of Subgenius.
Eris.
So I was going to ask about the justified true beliefs thing, but maybe we've sussed that out by now. I wanted to ask about the objective morality thing.
Okay.
Actually, no, real quick. So for the justified true beliefs, do you believe that we can ever know something?
Yes.
So does that require that we be able to determine that it's true 100%?
No. Knowledge does not require certainty. Okay. Fallibilism is the consensus in philosophy and science. You don't need 100% certainty for knowledge.
Okay. All right. I think that's good enough. So when people talk about mind independence, I'm always a little confused. Is that something that's divorced from a single mind or from any mind at all?
Any mind at all, typically. Depends on the context. Because if you're saying that something objectively exists, then it exists in reality independent of what any mind's opinions, thoughts, or intuitions are about it. But if I'm imagining a unicorn, that imagined unicorn objectively exists, even though it exists in my mind. And so you can have subjective thoughts that objectively exist.
Mm-hmm. So here's how I've always seen it. Maybe you can tell me where I'm wrong, if I'm wrong, or how it fits into this. So objective to me means that two people can believe two different things and one of them is right and one of them is not. But I don't think that needs to extend to the actual universe, like where there's human concepts like language, for example. Or if I am imagining a unicorn in a room of like 100 people and I'm the only one who sees it, those 100 minds.
I would probably disagree. So let's say I think that English is better than Latin, or that Pokemon is better than Digimon, and you disagree. Who is objectively right?
And it's just you and
Yep.
me? I don't think that can be answered.
Right. So I think your definition of having two people who disagree is probably not sufficient.
Sure. Okay. So let's say in the context of a society.
Sure.
When it comes to morality, I think there can be an objectively moral action and an objectively immoral action in the same situation. And that's not up to the two people deciding, it's up to the larger society. And that we could probably say is objectively what should be done in that situation. But that's
so go back to your definition of objective here. I think your definition of objective is missing something. So like if your definition of objective is that two people disagree and there's some larger society that has an opinion one way or the other, I don't think that matters at all. I wouldn't qualify that as objective at all. For example, like at one point in time, Galileo, Bruno Giordano thought that the world was not the center of the universe. The larger society thought that the world was the center of the universe. So is Bruno Giordano objectively wrong? No, he was objectively right, because the objectivity is opposite of the subjective context of the society or the individual, because those are both subjective.
He may not have been justified though, because he had a dream about it, whereas Galileo observed it. And based on just a dream, you might say that he didn't have a justified true belief, but he happened to have a true belief nonetheless.
Correct. He was objectively correct, but not justified.
Yeah, I would also say that that's slightly different from like morality, though.
Well,
so
objective
reality.
Forget morality here. What I want to focus on is objective and subjective, because your question was specifically about what makes something objective. And I think what makes something objective is it has to correspond to reality, independent of what anybody thinks about it. No opinions, intuitions, feelings, perspectives, none of that matters.
Right.
And I think that you can't have that in a societal context. I don't think there could be an objectively correct truth that's based on what society thinks. Society's opinion just doesn't matter to objectivity. So I don't think that.
Well, what about?
Go ahead.
Yeah. What about like the meanings of words?
Yeah,
like
I don't think there's no objective truth there. So like if society agrees that the word potato means like a vegetable thingy, I don't know, a starch thingy. There's no objective truth to that. There's actually a law in linguistics that specifically says this is called the natural ambiguity of language, that there is no objectively truth or objectively true meaning to any words. Doesn't exist. It's a law in linguistics. So there is no objectively correct meaning to words. There's a societally correct meaning to words, but that's also still a subjective frame of reference.
But so could there be like levels of subjectivity?
Oh, absolutely.
In that sense?
Definitely, yes.
Okay. Would that ever get to the point of being able to call it objective, like functional?
No.
No.
Not unless we're in like a idealist universe where everything is literally in a mind.
Right.
The words have
point of
usages.
language. They change over time.
Yeah, but over time, like through time, they can change meanings, but those meanings are going to be sort of societal. Like something might not mean what it meant 200 years ago, but things can be different across cultures or across time. But during that time and in that place, I would say that they do have a meaning.
I would agree, but I wouldn't ever call it objective.
Yeah. Okay.
The usages can be described more or less objectively in terms of saying, okay, these people with these minds mean this by this word, and they agree on that much. They all might have slightly different implications in their mind. Like, for example, one person might view a word as a pejorative, and another person might view it as a praiseworthy thing. And they may be using the same word, and one of them means all the bad things they think are associated with it, and one of them means all the good things they're associating with it. They disagree about what the thing really is, because one of them thinks it has bad properties, the other one does not, and so on. But the reference is the same at least, and that's all we mean when we say they're talking about the same thing. They're not necessarily talking about exactly the same thing, but they're talking about the same referent, which they ascribe different properties to.
I agree with all of that. I'm interested in why you said more or less objectively.
It was a slip of the tongue. He was mistaken.
Okay, that's fair enough.
All right. Anybody else have any questions? Who I just let up? Some more people.
I would have put something in the text chat, but I can't find it. But the term in linguistics that I reflect on is,
so don't worry about it.
No worries. Is generosity of polysemy. So within linguistics, polysemy is the idea that all words have different meanings to different people in different times in different ways. And being generous to that allows a conversation to proceed beyond the definition of this, not that, blah. So generosity of polysemy.
Yeah, when you look in a dictionary and there's like definition 1, definition 2, definition 3, each of them implies a particular context where it has that definition rather than another. Those are the polysemous meanings of words. And anyone who tells you that it only means one of those, and that's the absolute correct version of the word, usually is making that assumption because they're only familiar with one of the contexts. And when someone tries to use one of the context meanings of a word to be equivalent to the other context meaning of the word, like people do with faith all the time, it's just equivocating because they're talking about sense 1 definition of the word and sense 2 definition of the word as though they're the same thing and therefore equivalent when they're not.
Like the very first premise of Kalam cosmological, the universe began to exist. Universe in that context can refer to all natural things, or it can refer to our specific space-time continuum. And in the Kalam, they are equivocating between the physics usage, which is our space-time continuum, universe began to exist, and conflating that with the all natural things version. And that is the same polysemous usage of that word being conflated with a different one.
I think they're also doing the same with began to exist, because in the first premise, everything that we have examples of beginning to exist that has a cause are things that were created out of previous material. And then when we switch to the second premise about the existence of matter and energy itself, that seems to be a different category.
Yeah, the entire premise of the argument seems to be, what can we think of a God property? Beginning to exist. Okay, let's build that in. But it's not really a good argument because it doesn't include God in any of the premises or the conclusion.
Actually, I disagree, Amy.
The premise is, well, the premise of the Kalam argument is asking, really begging the question, how is everything here? There's a logical conclusion that we can come to say that everything couldn't eternally exist because that's unreasonable. And then there's a logical conclusion we can say that we did not come from nothing, because that's also another unreasonable stance. So the Kalam argument brings out the stance that you need an eternal entity that's outside of these things, time, space, and matter, isn't dependent upon them to create these systems. Because if they did eternally exist, then, I mean, well, actually they couldn't, because it's illogical.
Hey, Fipto, I've got a question. Does anything else exist without a cause? Or is there anything else that didn't begin to exist besides God, or is God the only thing that didn't begin to exist?
Well, so God didn't begin to exist. He came from eternity, and he's going into eternity.
Wait. So wait.
Is God the?
Wait. Stop.
Sorry,
Fipto, the question was: is there anything else that did not begin to exist, like God, or is God the only thing that did not begin to exist?
As far as I see, God's the only thing.
So then you are smuggling God into the first premise. Therefore, the Kalam you are saying is everything except God has a cause.
Yeah.
You're already. So
the law
this
causation.
is a circular argument because you're trying to prove the existence of God, and you're assuming the existence of God in the first premise.
No, because the premise is it's illogical to say that space, time, and matter all existed. I can show you the logical contradiction there.
No, you're not tracking what I'm saying. I'm saying you're saying everything.
Just clarify. So Shane's argument is that if you're saying that the only thing that didn't begin to exist was a God, then your premise, any premise that X didn't begin to exist, is smuggling in a God in that premise, because you've already presupposed God is the only thing that couldn't have begun to exist, which is
exactly.
No, it's not a smuggling. There's a logical conclusion you can come to say that God's necessary.
So, and then Fipto's argument is that not specifically that he's smuggling in God as the presupposed conclusion. He's specifically saying that of these properties in the universe, space, time, and matter, we know these must have a cause. These must have a beginning. And then he's going to infer God because he has the properties that don't require a beginning. So he's not trying to smuggle in.
That's an abductive argument.
Sort of.
That's an abductive argument, though, and you're affirming the consequences, saying, "Hey, if this
you can deduct, you can deduce that God's necessary."
So you're abductive. What you're doing is you're saying, "Hey, we have this mystery, and if this thing that I made up has these properties, this would also be a fit for what could cause this mystery that we don't know of. Therefore, this must be the case."
Well, do you want me to show you that it's completely illogical to think that the universe could have eternally existed?
Well, I think that's irrelevant to Shane's argument. So Shane's argument here is let's just grant that space, time, and matter had a beginning. It doesn't need to be a God. It could be something else.
Okay. Sure. Something outside of time, space, and matter. From the Christian worldview, it's attributed to what's identified as God.
Right, but that's the part that's just complete bullshit made up that we don't need that. That's like if I said, the universe has space, time, and matter had a beginning, and it was a magical potato. Like what? That seems like we just made up some garbage there. So the argument
Yeah,
is that
if it identified itself as a magical potato, sure.
no, the identification doesn't matter. I'm literally just saying magical potato. So what matters here is why do you think it has these properties of your Christian God and not some other set of properties that aren't your Christian God?
Are you saying timeless, spaceless, matterless?
Yep, has all of those, but is not your God. No consciousness, no mind, no Jesus, no Trinity. I don't know what your particular beliefs are, but none of the God stuff. Still has
sure.
timeless, spaceless,
Well,
material,
here,
quantum
okay.
field, no mind, no Jesus.
Yeah, yeah. Well, okay. So if you even suppose that you're invoking there's a God, you don't need to have a mind to be God, do you?
Yes.
Do you think God has a mind?
Oh yeah, God has a mind. But I'm saying, is it
Okay, so
necessary
is
that
it
God has a
possible?
mind?
Yes.
I'm asking you that question. You're the one who believes.
Why is it necessary that God has a mind?
Yes, I think so. Yes.
So you're saying it's possible.
Wait. Yeah. So yes.
Why? Why? Why is it necessary that God has to have a mind? Can you show me something from your worldview that says that God has to have a mind?
The definition of the word. Typically, the way most people use the word is that if there is no mind, and I ask them, okay, so let's say the fundamental nature of reality is just a field, has no mind, is it still a God? They're going to say no. So typically, the vast majority of humans who use the term God imply that it has a mind, and we atheists typically agree with that definition. So when we say the universe is all there is, we say that's not a God. That's why we're atheists. So typically, the way the vast majority of humans use the word God entails mind, and the way atheists use it is they believe in no mind, but they still believe in the fundamental nature of reality, and they're atheists. So just by the
No, but
meaning of the word.
you have to abandon your worldview in order to think that that's even
Hey,
allowable, because
Pinto.
we're talking about something that's matterless now.
No.
So Pinto, if you are talking about something that has no consciousness, has no agency, and has no mind, but is the foundational nature of reality, then I'll agree with you. And if you want to call it God, then that's fine. But I don't think that's what
No,
you're
you
arguing for at all.
can't agree with me because you're a naturalist, materialist.
Most atheists are not naturalists. Most atheists believe in
Materialists.
No, most atheists are not materialists. There's been several polls on this. The vast majority of people who are atheists are not naturalists or materialists. I am. I'm fully functionally with agreeing with that. But most are not. So atheists, what they mean by is no fundamental mind. That's what they mean. That is the thing all atheists agree upon, and that is the thing pretty much all theists agree upon is the mind.
No, you're redefining words in order to make an argument. They oppose theism, anti-theism, anti-God.
I'm going to mute you. I am not making up these definitions. These polls actually exist. Google are most atheist materialists. You can find these polls very easily. Most atheists are not materialists. They are not physicalists. What atheists and theists agree upon is no mind fundamental to reality. That is what they agree upon. That's why God entails a mind. Secondly, this is a second separate point. As a materialist, you can believe in things outside of space, time, and matter. Most physicists are materialists and believe in material things outside of space, time, and matter. Quantum fields, material things outside of space, time, and matter. It is not the case that materialists cannot believe in things outside of space, time, and matter. Literally, most of them do, because space and time are emergent from other material processes. So you were wrong about that as well.
And this is why I say Kalam is a bad argument. It is, well, it's the best they have because it's the most deistic, but it's because they don't want to defend the personal mind that wants a relationship with you. That's kind of hard.
So, yeah,
Oh
but
no,
William Lane
it's not
Craig
hard at
usually
all because that's where revelation actually kicks in. You can reject the revelation. That's God's permits that. He's allowed
this
that.
isn't the
But
Kalam anymore.
the fact that he exists, you're even claiming, we can't come through the natural material functions of the universe. We came from an outside entity. You've already given grounds to this entity being God. You're just redefining what God is and saying, well, if God does not have a mind, and I don't know the standard of which you're going to actually pull that out from, it's more of a hat trick. If God doesn't have a mind, he's not God.
Well, again,
So,
my specific claim, and I'll give it back over to Shane, but it is that the Kalam is a bad argument and that we don't believe that a God exists. Back over to you, Shane.
Yeah, sure. But let's just say this, mindless God. Mindless God. What then?
That I mean,
Does it
you can
matter?
call that God if you want, but that's not what you're here arguing
Yeah,
for. I'm
that's just
sure. So
redefining God.
what
That's just
usually?
Well,
that's what,
yeah,
exactly.
you're right.
What
I'd
Theist is
argue
doing?
that God has a mind, but I have a
So
standard of which, yeah, I actually
okay.
proof that. But you don't
So
have a standard to tell me that God can't have
right. You don't have a standard.
no
Okay, fine.
mind.
Anyway, so what you're doing here is you're not using. This isn't the Kalam cosmological argument. You're using the conclusion of the KCA, which is therefore the universe has a cause, as a premise in a new argument, and trying to say if you agree with the KCA, therefore you must agree with my new argument, and that's pretty dishonest.
No. I'm saying you have to abandon your actual argument. You think that the universe came through natural functions, I assume. Am I correct on that?
I think probably
I could be wrong.
It could be possible that there was something else. I think naturalism is most probable, and I lean towards that, but I'm not sure.
Yeah, but naturalism is also contingent upon, well, what? The natural world, what we see, what we visualize. It doesn't take into account an entity outside of space, time, and matter.
Yeah, because we're doing science.
But this is exactly what I'm talking about. Is now when we talk about the physical world, the material world, which naturalism and materialism, honestly, they go hand in hand. They kind of have to hold hands together, because I've never heard of a naturalist who speaks outside of the material world.
Explained this several times. You can be a physicalist or a naturalist, materialist, whatever, and believe that things exist outside of space-time. There's no contradiction in that world.
No, that is a contradiction. A materialist believes that there's only the material world. A naturalist believes there's only the natural world. That's
and a materialist,
by definition the stances they take.
And a physicalist also believes that space-time is an emergent property of something more fundamental, like quantum field or something like that.
But fields don't leave space-time. That's why they're called fields.
They don't know space-time. Space-time is an emergent property of
fields are still
field.
in space-time.
No, a field is just a mathematical manifold, right? So when we describe there being 13 fundamental fields, it doesn't mean that like those fundamental fields exist somewhere in space. It means that space is a thing that is a perturbation of those fields, right? Like if you asked where are the quantum fields, the question would be meaningless.
No, because we see quantum particles. So
no,
like okay, for example, are you going to tell me?
Particle? Are you talking about a virtual particle?
No, we're talking about quantum particles.
Okay, what do you
like
mean
actual
when you say
quantum particles? We observe actual quantum particles. They're physical particles.
What word? What are you actually referring to when you say quantum particle? Are you talking about a virtual particle, like the Casimir effect, or what are you talking about?
Okay,
you said that it exists. So can you explain it?
Virtual particle a quantum particle, or is it a fake particle?
It's a briefly existing particle and antiparticle that annihilate each other in what is otherwise apparently empty space. And they do so in a random fluctuating way, which if you compress two steel plates together, you observe a Casimir effect, which pushes against the two plates.
Yeah, it's not briefly existent, it's briefly observable.
Yeah,
I've heard
it's called a
other instances where people are... Okay, so virtual particles, so where they're briefly observable. Yeah, people, I've heard it. It's like the argument of, well, it's seemingly come into existence and out, but what's really happening here is, and I don't think anybody would ever make that claim because causality window. I mean, you can believe causality, it doesn't exist, sure. I mean, but I mean that would be your world, not mine, or not the world that the scientists actually agree on.
Well, can I actually ask about your world? You call us physicalists and naturalists. What would the label be that you go by opposite of that?
Yeah, I believe there's a spiritual world, something outside of the time, space, and matter. It even says from the theology, when King David was singing psalms to God, he even said from eternity into eternity. So it explains timeless.
If I can interrupt,
Paul himself says that God's...
You're a spiritualist, is that what you're saying? The label you would go by?
Well, yeah, negative connotations. I guess sure. A spiritualist following, the God of the Bible.
A Bibleist.
Yeah, sure.
So the problem is going to be that you don't have any generatable, novel, testable predictions from your worldview, and you're going to have to grant all the predictions methodological naturalism makes, and you're going to have to grant that naturalists believe that those predictions can be empirically adequate to explain all observed phenomena, including minds and brains, which are becoming more and more predictable and understandable. So, what is it that you think theism would do if it were true that would have any impact on the world?
I did actually invoke something observed, testable, the most consistent thing, causality, displaying that we cannot come from nothing. Like actually cannot come from nothing. That's the most consistent
novel.
law.
It's not novel.
I mean, yeah.
It's like if I predicted
causality's not everything's contingent upon causality.
Stop. If I predict the sun will rise tomorrow, and if the sun rises tomorrow, this is evidence of the spaghetti monster. Would you believe me? Would you be like, yeah, spaghetti monster?
No, because outside of the spaghetti monster, I mean, I don't. My epistemology does not depend on a spaghetti monster.
I don't care about that. It's like we already know the sun's gonna rise. Like that's a common thing that we've already known for thousands of years. It's pretty like everybody already knows this, right? So if I predict something that we already expect and already know, that's a nothing burger, right? We don't care. It's not evidence of anything. It's like anybody can just make something.
Yeah, sure.
Causality is the same thing. Causality is like the sun rising. We already know this. So you saying that, well, causality because God is no different than me saying, well, the sun rising tomorrow is evidence of the spaghetti monster. You got to predict something that's novel, something we don't know yet about the universe.
Okay. Well, no. I'm saying okay. So I shouldn't have said novel. I'm saying this is something we already know about the universe. Causality is a baseline function which all the scientists depend on. So if we abandon that, then you kind of have to question literally every part of your epistemology, because I mean, for example, if I came up and shanked you, and I were to say, well, the causality doesn't exist.
Wait,
I didn't shank you at any point.
Remember, we grant the sun is going to rise tomorrow because we already know it. We already grant causality. We don't need to question causality.
Yeah.
The question is
but I'm saying that this is an evidence.
No. Very specifically, you're saying we agree something we agree with.
So the question is how are you trying to go from causality to God? We go from causality to reality.
Because this breaks down the first one of the two barriers. It's either one or two dichotomies. You either believe in the world that was spontaneously created, or you believe, which means from literal non-existence to existence. Causality disputes that.
Nobody believes that.
Yeah, nobody believes that. I know. Okay, sure, but I'm saying so. This already blots out that one perspective. Then there's the other perspective that we were just eternally here. So that just leaves one issue to deal with.
Reality was
if we're gonna
here, yes.
Yeah, so you'd say reality is always here. I mean, somewhat to a degree, I agree. Reality was always here because God was always here.
I don't care. I don't care about
that's a reality.
False dichotomy.
Again, the question here is that causality is a phenomenon. We agree.
We're talking about the physical world. Was the physical world always here?
We agree causality is a phenomenon. Okay. We agree the sun rising is a phenomenon. Okay. Both of those can be explained by infinitely many hypotheses. Spaghetti monster, magical potatoes, God, quantum fields, leprechauns. They can all explain all past data. All past data can be explained by infinitely many hypotheses. This is a fact in science called the problem of underdetermination. So anything from the past that you want to explain, causality, the sun rising, all past events, all empirical phenomena that have ever been discovered can all be explained by any new hypothesis you want to make up. We don't care. What we want is a new one. We need something that we haven't seen yet, something we hasn't been predicted. We need a novel prediction. Just going by things in the past like causality or the sun rising or dinosaurs, we don't care. Anybody can explain all of those things very, very easily. In order for you to have evidence of your hypothesis, you need something new that nobody's predicted yet.
No, okay, so I think you're running away from the factor that I'm actually pointing out here. It's the elephant in the room. Is since you've thrown out spontaneous generation of the universe, you now have to depend on the eternal world. I can already dispute that that's illogical to believe that time, space, and matter were eternally here.
Nobody thinks that.
I mean, you want to go down that path?
I debunked you on that.
So you don't believe that. So you believe that the world.
Stop. Every physicist thinks time, space, and matter had a beginning. Time, space, and matter are emerging from quantum fields. We all grant that. Nobody thinks those don't have a beginning. None of them believe in a God. Completely irrelevant. So we all grant those have a beginning. No
Yeah,
God.
sure. Yeah, but usually
generation's been debunked.
Yeah, okay. Well, it's spontaneous generation, non-existent to existence. So what you're saying is you're trying to fill in the gap here, where you have an entity that's outside of time, space, and matter, but you don't know what it is.
Field. We know exactly what it
and
is. It's been tested. It's been confirmed. God is a made-up nonsense that has no evidence. Quantum fields has evidence. Again, irrelevant.
Quantum fields are physical.
Yes.
They're part of the physical world. So you're saying time, space, and matter always existed then?
Again, physical world exists outside of time, space, and matter. The physical world goes beyond time, space, and matter. Time, space, and matter are things that come about after the physical world.
If you have matter, do you need space?
No.
No. So matter can exist outside of a space.
And time. Yes. There can be physical fields that exist outside of space and time. This is very basic physics. Google
physical fields. No. You're
Google emergent space-time. This is very basic physics. There's physical.
That's a theory.
No, this is physical, natural, material things that exist outside of space-time. It is the consensus in physics. It is what all of the evidence suggests and all of the predictions. Have we proven it? No. Is it better than a God? Infinitely, because there's no evidence of a God. So this is the consensus among physicists who are physicalists, who are materialists, that space and time is emergent. This is non-controversial. This is like you just going against all of the physicists saying, I don't think it's possible that the thing in physics that most physicists believe is a thing.
So you're saying that physical particles, physical properties can exist outside of a space, of a spatial realm.
Academic field. Yes, that is the consensus in the experts of every related field. Yes.
Do you have one paper that actually confirms this?
Space-time.
Well, yeah. I know what they like to say, and it's a disputed case. Like you're acting like it's a consensus, but it's not a consensus. You can't LARP that.
It is the consensus.
If you want some physicists to read on the subject,
no, that's a LARP. I've looked into that. That's a LARP. That is not a consensus.
If you want some physicists on the subject, read Don Page and William Wooters.
I like.
No, but okay. Some physicists is different from consensus. You are LARPing. You are lying.
No, this is the consensus.
No, you are lying.
Stop talking.
Can I suggest that the number of physicists who can actually work with this?
Stop talking. So this is the consensus in physics. Go look at Nima Arkani Haman's paper and Sean Carroll's paper on the topic. This is the consensus in physics. It is the consensus that space and time is emergent. We pretty much know for a fact they are not fundamental. That is the very majority consensus. But wait, stop.
Yeah,
stop,
no.
Fipto, stop talking.
You're mixing things up now. You're mixing it up.
Fipto. The more important thing here is that can you show me a paper in physics about God, any property of God?
Yeah, so God's a non-physical entity. So you're going to take one metric that does not apply to God.
Stop. You can't show me any papers in physics about a God. I don't need to show you any papers in physics about an
Is that confirmation?
Stop talking, Fibdo. Stop talking, Fibdo. Shut the fuck up. I don't need to show you any papers in physics for a physical thing outside of space-time, because in order to be an equivalent hypothesis, all I need to do is present equivalent evidence for that as you have for God. So I have more evidence for this than you have of God, simply because there are papers in physics about this theory that are combinations of principles, particles, and laws that have been verified to exist independent of our imagination. You have none of that for a God. So you asking for a paper about emergent space-time being confirmed with some kind of empirical result is just irrelevant. You don't have that for a God. I don't need that for this to be a better hypothesis than yours. All I need
emergence theory is the same evidence.
No, it's not.
It's just what you're going to attribute it to. It is the same evidence to say that. That's what this. You're echoing what Theist said all along.
Pay attention. What makes one theory better than another in physics is that the theory is a combination of principles, particles, and laws that have been verified to exist. The combination may not have been shown to exist yet. So the combination of emergent space-time may not have been shown, but all of the parts, all of the math, all of the physics in the paper is only made of things that have been demonstrated to exist independent of our imagination. They don't add leprechauns, they don't add fairies, they don't add omniscient, omnipotent, omnibenevolent, they don't add minds outside of space-time. They don't add any of the supernatural garbage. This is what's the difference.
Yeah,
Wait,
no,
wait.
yeah.
Just one last thing.
I agree.
What
I
makes
agree.
one theory better than another is no part of the theory is something that has yet to be demonstrated to exist. Every part has been demonstrated to exist independent of our imagination, and only those pieces are allowed in physics, which is why physical theories like emergent spacetime are better than magical Sky Daddy. And simply the fact
You're
that we
also
haven't confirmed it is
using
irrelevant.
you're also
You do
using
know emergent
as
space theory is
argument,
the same thing
but
theists have been saying the entire time. You're just saying, but not God.
A hypothesis is supposed to be an educated guess, where a theory is a framework of fact. So when you say something like it's just a theory, these people should just take a science class. But I am sending you love.
Well, so it's not the same. It's not the same, Fipto.
Yeah, I've not said it's just a theory or nor a hypothesis or anything like that.
You
said
did.
you're echoing what theists have said the entire time now, but you're trying to flip the script and you're saying, well, we're just deducting
No,
God. We're saying not God though.
Again, Fipto,
That's
Fipto, pay
all you're
attention, pay
saying.
attention. The difference here, one theory is made of only things that have been confirmed to exist independent of our imagination and does not add anything to it that has not been confirmed, like no supernatural, no miracles, no magic, no mythical creatures, paranormal, supernatural UFOs. None of that is added in. This is the difference. If you have a theory where you add any of those in, it's garbage, trash, potato junk. If you have a theory without any of those things, it's reasonable and acceptable in science because it has a more plausible basis in reality. This is the difference. So I don't care if you think this is what theists have been saying with their magical goo garbage that hasn't been confirmed. Until they can make a hypothesis that's only a combination of principles, particles, and laws that have been demonstrated to exist independent of our imagination, the physics one is better.
No, but hold on. But here's the issue. You're actually smuggling this in. You're saying
what?
It came out of a non-spatial. You have matter existing outside of a non-spatial area.
Yeah.
What's the evidence for that?
The combinations of principles, particles, and laws that have been confirmed that show you can have interactions outside of space-time. You can solve the equations and derivations of general and special relativity without time by removing the time equation and still have causality. So there is lots of combinations of theories that can do this, that have the basis in reality because they're only combinations of principles, particles, and laws that we confirmed. You don't have that. You imagine Sky Daddy God can do stuff.
Let me.
You don't have a combination
rephrase
of
the
principles,
question.
particles, and laws that actually exist.
Yeah. Are you saying that we have a tool that observes outside of a spatial area?
I don't need that. Again, all I have.
You don't need that.
Wait,
You're
wait,
just
stop,
so you don't see it.
So
you don't see it.
So I don't need to see it. Again, the difference here is can I build a model that is a combination of principles, particles, and laws that we have already seen? And can this combination explain the data? Now, I don't need to see the actual combination. Like string theory. String theory is a combination of two things. Early universe inflation, Guth's early universe inflation, and virtual particles in the Casimir effect. We've observed both of these things. Have we observed strings? No, we've never observed strings. We've never observed string theory directly, but string theory is a combination of two things that we have observed. Now, if I add in magical leprechaun fairy dust, it's a garbage theory. Immediately thrown out, not accepted in physics. Nobody gets it. We don't care because the magical fairy dust has never been seen. So if all of the parts have been seen, even if the whole hasn't, it's better than any theory that adds in any one part that has not been seen. So in the case of emergent spacetime, all of the parts have been seen. Your God, none of the parts have been seen. Therefore, they are not equivalent theories. Yours is garbage with fairy dust. Ours is physics.
But here's the issue. I asked you a key question. Have you observed
I
this
don't need to
spaceless
observe
area?
it.
So
there's
just
an
assuming
experimental. There's an experimental confirmation of the emergence of space-time. Did you get the paper that I sent you? Or it's an article about the paper. I'll get you the actual paper. Yeah. So I sent you an article.
I can't read it right now.
That's fine. I'm going to just summarize it for you. It says time is an emergent phenomena that is a side effect of quantum entanglement, and they have the first experimental results to prove it. And I'll skip down to the experiment. Ekaterina Mareva at the Institut National in Turin, Italy, and a few pals performed the first experimental test of Page Wooter's ideas about emergent spacetime from entanglement. They confirmed that time is indeed an emergent phenomena for internal observers, but absent for external ones. The experiment involves the creation of a toy universe consisting of a pair of entangled photons. An observer can measure their state in one of two ways. In the first way, they measure the evolution of the system by becoming entangled with it. In the second, the godlike observer outside of the system measures the evolution against an external clock, which is entirely independent of the toy universe. The experimental details are straightforward. The entangled photons each have a polarization which can be changed by passing it through a birefringent plate. In the first setup, the observer measures polarization of one photon, thereby becoming entangled with it. He or she then compares this with the polarization of the second photon, and the difference results in a measure of time. In the second setup, the photons again both pass through the birefringent plates, which change their polarizations. However, in this case, the observer only measures the global properties of both photons by comparing them against an independent clock. In this case, the observer cannot detect any difference between the photons without becoming entangled with one or the other, and if there is no difference, the system appears static. In other words, time does not emerge. Although extremely simple, the model captures the two seemingly contradictory properties of the Page-Wouters mechanism, said Morevet and Co. So what they're saying is, we observe something in the universe at the scale that we're at, which, if it's explanatory about how time works, could be scaled up to explain how time gets there in the first place. If you have entanglement, you have time and you have gravity. Both gravity and time are being explained as emergent phenomena of entanglement.
Okay. So the question I actually posed earlier happened to be, okay, time, space, matter, all this existing eternally. I think you guys have already denied that it's emergent. Now, okay, let's just say it emerges. Where does the matter come from?
The quantum fields, the things we literally just said.
Yeah, so the quantum fields. So, but does it invoke any sort of time? Do these quantum
No,
fields have a
time is a
time,
field
or
that comes about from the other quantum fields. Time is one kind of
no?
field.
Time is a measurement of change
No,
in
time is a
science.
field. Time is literally a
It
physical
is.
field.
Yeah, it's a
No,
measurement
it's not.
of change
No, it's
in
not.
science.
It is not a
This is
measurement of
the
change.
scientific
Fipto,
definition
pull
of
your
it.
head out of your ass. Time is a specific field in physics. It is
Can
not
you
a
Google the
measurement of
scientific
change.
definition of time?
There is no definition of time. Time is a literal
There is.
physical field. You're using
It's
your
a physical
dumbassness.
Flipto,
change. Yes,
No.
it's a
consider
physical
being
measurement
generous
of
with your
change.
polysemy. If you're forcing apodictic, then you're being like Darth Dawkins.
So, Fipto,
Thank
you
you.
are wrong. There is no philosophical definition of time. Philosophers have their heads up their ass. Einstein debunked that.
I didn't say philosophical. I said
The
scientific.
scientific definition, it's a physical field.
Philosophy of
I know.
science.
It's a measurement
No,
of change.
Fipto, you're wrong.
That's what
Is
time
not.
is.
It is
It
a
is.
physical
It is.
field. There is no
Google
measurement
it for
of
me,
change.
please.
It's a physical field.
Fact check me. Fact check me.
Google
What is
space-time field.
in
You
the
idiot.
sciences? Yeah, space time. Yeah. What? How do they discover time?
And
It's
if
a
you
measurement of change.
No, you idiot.
Physical
I
measurement of change.
debunked you on this. This was literally a debate that
You
Einstein.
debunked me.
Stop talking.
Can you
Stop
look up
talking.
the scientific?
Stop talking.
Can you look up
Fipto,
the
shut up
scientific?
or I'm going to mute you.
Flippo,
Shut up, I'm going to mute you.
Flippo, can you be
Stop.
gentle here? Like, why are
So,
you?
Fipto, this was an actual debate that philosophers had with Einstein. Einstein had this debate with philosophers where they said time is a measurement of change. Einstein said, no, time is a physical field that changes. It is not a measurement of change. Einstein won. There can be change with no time. That's the whole point of the word emergent space-time. If space and time emerge, that means there's something else where change happens prior to space-time, outside of space-time with change. You are wrong, Fipto. You have your head up your ass. In physics, space and time is a specific kind of a field, and there are other kinds of fields that change can happen in that are not space-time.
I would also like to ask the obvious questions here, which is you just reject things like quantum fields, but then I would like to know where God came from. If you're saying there can't be things outside of time and space, if you are rejecting and saying that must be contingent on something and that all things must be, by that logic, I just want to know what God is contingent on.
Okay. Well, God's a non-contingent being, non-dependent being.
Or just like the quantum fields. So now we're
Yeah.
both even. Why do you think a God exists?
No. But these are physical. Yeah, quantum fields are out. Okay, have you shown me a paper that says that quantum fields are outside of time, space, and matter?
Every single
Because
paper
I mean,
that is
they're
about emergent
particles
space-time
that are
says that.
matter.
Every single paper. Nima
Also,
Arcani Hamad.
T-Jump, I sent you three
Google,
articles. I sent you
Nima
3 articles
Arcani
that
Hamad,
give you the
emergent
definition of
space-time.
time.
You're an idiot. I don't care about
Yeah.
your articles. In physics,
T-Jump,
time is a field. You're wrong.
I sent you the articles from study.com, Science
Dumbass, you're
Alert.
done. I'm not even going to bother you. You're wrong. Your dumbass confirmation bias of trying to find a definition of time that fits your dumbass ideology is wrong. The consensus in physics is space and time is emergent, is not a measure of time, or not a measure of change. There are fields that can have change outside of space-time. That's literally the whole point of the theory. You're done.
Also, when I asked him to defend his belief, he once again went right back to attacking science. Like, they can't do it. The whole guy coming back from the dead, that is so, let's just use the word silly, that we have to stick around here to these deistic arguments that have been outdated for hundreds of years.
I guess it's strange, right? Like they have this very weak skepticism against Christianity, Jesus, God, but when it comes to science, they have like very strong skepticism, and they use the scientific method itself, and they ask us for tons of evidence, and they still won't believe it. Strange.
Well, that's why T-Jump was asking for papers. He consistently was going, well, where's your paper? Where's your paper? We actually have scientific papers that are not only hypotheses, that are building frameworks of facts, that are working theories. But when we go for any of that, for Christianity, Islam, Judaism, nada.
True.
Anybody else? Questions, comments, philosophy, politics? Aiden.
Hey guys, yeah, I actually want to talk about kind of response to Amy Newman with the God thing. In my opinion, my beliefs, I think there's infinite demigods, and one of them could be really close to Christianity. So we're kind of at the mercy of them if they manifest. Like I think the Bible could be misunderstood by humans, and it could just reference a powerful alien entity that is more to the Christian belief system.
You're
So
not
we're still
saying
at the
it's
mercy.
aliens, but aliens.
Yeah, but we're still at the mercy. I wouldn't say like there's no God. We're just, you know, we're
Okay,
kind
so
of just winging it.
let's just start out by asking, why do you believe that there are demigods?
I think there's beings that have transcended biology in some way, have fused with cybernetics, or even gone further, the next level. And to them, the actions that they can do to us look like magic.
So you're saying they transcended biology. This sounds like transhumanism, but
Yep,
why do you think that they exist?
because if we were to merge our brains with cybernetic or digital consciousness, then you could just kind of program an AI to, you could sleep for like 1,000,000 years, but not perceive it, and have an AI wake you up that has developed more cybernetic power, like
Okay.
abilities, et cetera, et cetera. It starts going in like a sci-fi kind of thing.
But you're saying that is a could happen, that is a maybe in the future. What does that have to do with demigods existing and any correlation to the Bible?
Well, because it could be the case, like I don't think the universe is finite. I think it's so vast and big that somewhere there's some being that has transcended in such a way that has pretty much accomplished this task.
Can I make a counterclaim to your claim?
Sure.
I think the Bible is a bunch of false positives, and it's a better collection of history of how humans used to think, and it shouldn't be looked at as a historical text or how we should live our lives today.
Well, it seems like based on that, it seems like you have something specifically against Christianity and
Sure,
not
just like
looking
all
at
the other ones.
if you relegate all of them the same thing. I mean, what if there's this alien entity that just manifests and just says, "Aha, you're all wrong. I'm going to enslave an array of people that didn't believe in me."
I
Like
think
we
we should sell that script to Netflix.
Well, I
Watch
count it
that.
as a possibility. I don't think it's impossible.
I know someone
But
else
do you
wanted to
believe
say
it's
something.
true?
Yes, exactly.
We're not
I
talking
bel
about what's possible. You're saying, I think this is actually the case. And whenever we ask, like, why do you think that's the case? You say, well, it could be. This might be true. I don't know. It couldn't. There's no way to tell.
Sure.
But
I'll be honest. I have trust. I have trust and confidence that this is the case. There's the universe is too
why?
big for us to just be the only ones, and there could be some alien entity that could travel space
There could
time,
be.
and well,
There
that's
could
just
be, but
my trust.
sure. But there are a lot of things that could be possible. There could be leprechauns. There could be unicorns. There could be a giant magical flying tomato. I don't want to say potato because T-Jump says potato all the time. But you know, just because it could be the case and you can't say it's logically impossible doesn't mean that it is. You should wait to believe something until you have actual evidence or good reason to think that it actually is the case rather than just a possibility.
I'm not going too out there because we're getting close to merging with digital consciousness. Like within 50 years to 100 years kind of thing.
But when I think of digital consciousness, the Bible is not the first thing that comes to mind. There's a lot of good things out there, like a lot of good books. Why not Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy or Lord of the Rings? Why mythology that comes from 2000, 3000, sometimes even older years ago?
I think the
Well,
problem is also this is a very popular story, so he just seems to want to believe it. There's lots of popular stories that are false when you look at it through a skeptical lens.
You're right, Ape God. I think they have compelling stories. Like um, humans learn language. Once they learn language, they're able to communicate like the hard questions of life, right? Like what's the meaning of life? Where did we come from? So it seems like in those times, a good answer to it was some powerful being, right? It could be the case that it's just stories for men.
I did look into some of this. Yeah, sure. If you want to take empirical sciences out and then like create a judgment like based on like a philosophical discussion, sure. Like it might be possible that there's a lot of depictions from historical times. I think the hieroglyphs on Egyptian pyramids, and I think the stories in Hinduism regarding some kind of entities, which might be completely fairy tales, but it could also be the case that there could be some historical aliens that did come down, and people might have mistaken those to be actual gods, and they wrote down these religions when it was actually not really God but just advanced civilizations. Even I do think that based on the evidence we have in physics, which suggests things like infinite multiverse, or like the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics, it might be possible that given enough time and given the probabilistic nature of particle physics, there could be a lot of like entities that evolve to be some kind of like god-like beings or whatever, who have special capabilities. Or but yeah, again, it's we don't have much evidence of that, but it's inevitable if the universe is infinite.
So
There could
right
be all
now,
kinds.
just science fiction. However, not out of the natural, it's not supernatural. We just need good
Yeah, it's not
evidence.
supernatural. Completely
Sure.
natural. I'm not talking about any supernatural stuff.
There's just not
So
evidence sufficient to justify the belief.
Exactly.
that sounds like the same arguments made for the simulation theory.
Yeah, the
Yeah, sort
simulation
of.
theory has some boundaries to its plausibility. It's not implausible like on its face, because we know how to simulate things and we know that you can scale something up to a more
I think
grand scale.
we need
But
test predictions.
there's some reasons why simulating the entire universe is probably impractical, if not borderline implausible, due to things like computronium, which is to say perfected matter, for computational purposes, whatever that turns out to be, like the world's best possible quantum, photonic computer or whatever, is still going to have an upper bound on the amount of information that it can represent. And if you take all the computronium that you can assemble without collapsing into a black hole, which is what happens if you get too much star stuff in one spot, boom, you get a black hole. It has an upper limit. it's not going to be enough computronium to simulate all of the matter in the known universe in any one gravity well that is not going to collapse into a black hole. So in other words, I think it's plausible that there could be a Truman Show universe. Like if it were the case that when we started expanding sufficiently, we were prevented from going very far or reaching very many planets because we like exceeded the capacity of the computer that we're simulated in, that would be evidence that we lived in the Truman Show simulator that turns out to be plausible and feasible with one solar system's worth of computronium. But if it's not the case that we live in that kind of universe, once we get to a certain number of planets, we exceed the bounds of computronium to plausibly simulate, then there's just no way we could still be in a simulated universe unless the parent universe is completely different from ours, and then all bets are off.
Yeah, actually, that's what I wanted to say. Like, I think if we are, I'm not sure if we're in a simulated universe, but like if we are in one, it'd be more likely that like the computer that's simulating us is in a different, is operating under different like laws of physics. Like, because when we simulate things on our computers, we don't have to operate on like the actual laws of physics, right? We can create, new funky physics, right? It wouldn't be a simulation at that point, but we can create our own. It doesn't have to follow. If like I'm making a video game, right? I can change the properties of gravity and stuff like that, right? So it maybe we're in a simulation, but it's not operating under the same laws of physics that the computer is.
Yeah, that still kind of falls under the Truman Show definition, right? Because
I
it's
don't know
it's a
what the
Mickey.
Truman Show is.
Okay, so the Truman Show is a movie about a guy who has grown up in a film set, a live TV show that his whole life is a lie. Everyone is watching him on television, living in a bubble. He only lives in a town. If you go outside of the town, you hit a wall. There's literally a fake sky over him and everything. A bunch of people have succumbed to like paranoid schizophrenia, believing that they live in the Truman Show after seeing this movie. Because essentially, certain ideas like this, and the idea that you could be like controlled by like government lasers or something, have led people to put on tinfoil hats. It's one of those kind of delusional nightmares. Well, it's a plausible scenario that we could be living in some Mickey Mouse pseudo universe, but it's implausible if the universe is like the one that we live in, for us to be living in an equivalent universe outside of ours, if it's the case that we can't go beyond certain bounds of what's simulatable within a single solar system mass of computronium.
I do think that there is a solution for this. If you actually look into, I think, artificial intelligence, some of the recent understanding that they've arrived at based on research, it's like how neural networks are like compressors. There is a large amount of information, and then you can compress that information and develop like an understanding. Once that understanding is established, it's sort of like reducing very large complex structures to like basic mathematical equations from which every other thing can emerge. So what I do think is that the main problem we see with simulations is that even to simulate a very tiny portion of the universe, there is a very large amount of computation required. And the problem with that is when you use the traditional systems like classical computation, like for example in games we have ray tracing. There is no intelligence behind it. There is no compression. All the textures and all the methods are actually stored, but the calculations are very huge for lights bouncing off. But on the other hand, there were recent papers published where neural networks are actually learning more about the world and how things work, and then they scale it using parallel computation. And because it has a general understanding of the world and how things look and how things appear and the causal relationship between facts, it is now able to create simulations with near 99% accuracy of the ones that you can see, which is manually calculated by whatever systems. So this intelligent system can actually compress that information. So millions of different kinds of like emergent phenomena are all compressed to a very tiny structure from which every other thing emerges. I think that's the solution for simulation.
Are you talking about light transport simulations?
I can't explain
What simulations?
exactly.
Can you just say what kind of simulation you're referring to?
So for example, they were showing fluid simulations, right? So there are these
fluid dynamics and light transport are there are similar problems. Okay, so if you want to simulate fluid dynamics and light transport, you can apply neural networks to that and get pretty good heuristic speedups that are just about as good as the like baseline procedural approach. Yes. However, just like any other kind of compression, there are artifacts, and it's simple. If you do statistical curve fitting, you're going to get some function that approximates the curve. That's what universal function approximators do, of which neural networks are one type of universal function approximator. But there's going to be a slight mismatch. And for something that's stable over time, something which doesn't deviate from like perfectly predictable laws like our universe appears to, those kinds of things are not the kind of thing that lossy compression or like approximate curve fitting is good at. So I agree that we would use, and we already are using, neural networks to significantly speed up a verisimilitude level approximation. In other words, a video game that fools someone who's playing it who doesn't notice the problems. But we don't live in a world that just has to fool an observer with like good enough approximations. We live in a world where if you trace everything back in a Laplacian demon kind of way, most physical phenomena are totally reversible. Most of the laws of physics are bidirectional. The Wheeler-DeWitt equations are reversible, and everything appears to have perfect lossless information transfer from one quanta event to the other. So there's
And
not the kind of world that's being fudged constantly.
do you know what I think is the reason why those simulations are approximate and not 100% accurate? I think the reason behind that, why these fluid simulations are like getting to close level accuracy but not 100% accuracy, is because when we talk about the theory of everything in physics, the reason why we have not yet completed that theory is because when we compress all the data and information around us, we have a very close approximation to the way the physical universe works. But the point is, we don't have the information of all the different potential hidden variables. But I think once we do have access to all the potential hidden variables, and then when you compress that, you get one mathematical equation from which the entire universe emerges. For example, if I were to create a computer program, and if I have a certain mathematical equation along with the base textures from which like the game, for example, emerges, right? If you don't have all the variables, there is a limitation to how much back you can reverse engineer it. But if you have all the variables, you can precisely reconstruct that game without approximations.
Ape God, actually, I want to respond to that. I think it's like, if you know what an emulator is, I think it's like the difference between like an emulator and a simulator. It's like, uh, if we're in a simulation, right? We know that like you can't, like, let's say we have like a Super Nintendo, for example, right? You can't possibly make a Super Nintendo emulate a Super Nintendo, right? An emulator always has to be more powerful than the machine it's trying to emulate. So,
Right.
and the reason I bring up emulation, because emulation is different. Emulation is different than simulation, right? Where simulation, you're just looking for good enough, right? Where emulation, it's looking for what you want, which is precise. It has to be absolutely
Coming after me.
one to reality. So I don't think we can emulate reality in reality. I don't
Oh wait,
think.
I do think, yeah, I get your point. I think that it is completely, yeah, it's entirely possible that within the computer itself, unless there is some like ability to like extract extra like RAM power or energy or something, yeah, sure, you can't get like an exact one-to-one functioning reality. But I do think that there is a good example for this, right? You have a Windows computer. Your Windows computer has a certain amount of RAM and processing power, but within the Windows computer, you can deploy a virtual machine that is an exact copy of the actual system that is hosting it, right? But the only difference on the virtual machine is that despite it running on the exact same functions, it is having reduced power. That's the only difference.
Okay. Okay, but that's
The
the thing.
thing
What
is
if? Okay, go
more
ahead.
problematic when you have something that's not just two slightly different instruction sets. So in the case of emulation, for instance, you're getting to cheat by the fact that the two chipsets that you're emulating, for instance, are nearly identical in the sense that they're both universal Turing machines. So this is like trying to approximate the number 8 by writing 2 times 2 times 2. Okay, so 2 times 2 times 2 is equivalent to 8, right? It's not merely similar to it. It is the same, but it's because I use something that's almost the same kind of thing, a number, to construct the other thing. Now, if I were to try to perfectly approximate the abstraction of 8 with pieces of meat, I'm going to need a lot more stuff to establish all of the necessary representations and so on to get something equivalent to the number 8, which is what we have in our brains for math, right? So when you do something in a universal function approximator like neurons, you do so in a very inefficient way that's very universal, which is great, but it's massively less efficient than the thing that it is representing. It takes
Correct.
thousands of neurons to emulate a few particles. So in the same sense, when you are comparing emulation of one software microarchitecture to another, it's not comparable to simulating the universe inside of a computer.
I do think that the one difference that we've seen, I'll send you this paper later when I have time. I have it saved. So, like as we keep scaling computation, like parallel computation, it is like starting to be able to do things that we never thought were possible. So, in the earlier neural network simulations, these simulations were barely accurate. But as they keep expanding or scaling computation, these simulations are getting much closer to like things like
The
Unreal Engine, for
simulations,
example.
look, the simulations in question, we're talking about extremely simplified simulations of water that do not simulate individual molecules or atoms or anything of the kind. They're
Yeah,
simulating
sure.
particles big enough for you to see. In other words,
Right.
pixels. The general goal in any like real-time graphics engine is to simulate pixels, not to simulate physical reality. And pixels are billions of times less precise than the actual physical world. When we simulate particle accelerators and try to analyze their results, we use some of the world's largest supercomputers to approximate a few particles colliding with sufficient energy to yield some novel result. And that's not the kind of thing that is just trivially compressible in a way that is as deterministic as our universe is. I think people take huge liberties in analogizing like video game approximations, which are only designed to achieve verisimilitude, with physical emulations, as we were referring to the term. A physical emulation, like the kind we're trying to do in like particle acceleration and so on, is orders of magnitude more complex than a verisimilitude approximation. And it's not merely a matter of like sprinkling neural networks on it to sort of speed things up. And it may be the case that quantum computers allow for some unforeseen breakthrough, sure. But we so far have not seen quantum computers being universally like superior. Quantum supremacy has only been demonstrated in a narrow field of algorithms that are amenable to it being more efficient than classical computing. In almost every other case, they're massively more expensive, less efficient, etc., than the equivalent classical computer, because it's like trying to hit a piece of paper with a hammer that doesn't need to be hit with a hammer, right? You could just tear it with your fingers. Why bother with the hammer, and vice versa, right? So
Yeah, I do agree. I do agree with a lot of things that you said. Like we do have some current limitations, but I think in one of the videos, but I do think that like in the near future, yeah, these things might change, especially with all the progress we have in artificial intelligence. We might even discover some new methods in which these things can use like less resources. I do remember one scientist actually talking about how these very huge number of like things that have to be mathematically calculated in particle accelerators. Okay, very huge number of like events going on, right? Like he talked about how like I need to do further research on that, but he said how all those different events can be compressed down to like a few lines, like 10 billion different events can be compressed to like 10 different lines that describe them, from which every other thing emerges. I can send you the video that I saw on that.
yeah, all I'm saying is when anyone says we're probably living in a simulated universe, they're leaving out all of the ifs. And there's lots of hypotheses like these that are potentially plausible, like a hypothesis about aliens or a hypothesis about a simulated universe. But there's a huge number of ifs, and it generally depends on what you think those prior probabilities are. And there's a number of those that we just can't know for quite some time because we're nowhere near the development level to be able to speculate.
I love this subject. What's your guys' thoughts on like the ability to maybe not like do something very sophisticated, like transfer your consciousness but what if you can control your sleep? You can maybe like mentally sleep for like 6 months and then wake up and not age or anything. Wouldn't like you can just tell an AI to build your simulated universe while you're sleeping?
What?
You're saying if you went into
There's no
suspended
reason to.
animation,
Oh,
Let's say it.
There's a number
you're just
of
saying if
science
you went
fiction
into
novels where
suspended
that is the
animation,
major idea.
you could wait for some breakthrough that's currently impossible so you could find out the answer in the future. That's what you're saying?
Yeah, like just because when you sleep and you wake up, you don't perceive those like 8 hours of sleep. What if you can do it for 6 months and then like your AI bot's like solving your problems or
Yeah, that
getting
would be
stuff
great.
done?
Like if you could just like go into a hyperbaric chamber and sleep for like 100 years and wake up when all the technology is fixed, that'd be phenomenal.
I think it would be crazy not to do that, assuming that the world was going to turn out in a good way and you weren't just going to never wake up because it gets nuked or something. Yeah.
There's the documentary about that called Idiocracy. Literally what
Yeah,
happens.
exactly. It's what plants crave.
Wait, T-Jump,
Wait,
you do
I
know
love
that
I
that
love how you
exists,
said
right?
that
Like
was a
that-
documentary because it like yes,
I have
documentary. Yes.
Like I said, I've got a lot of influence from the subgenius.
There's also
Uh,
a lot of
I
data.
did feel like
Unfortunately, there was a
I
flood
did feel
attack.
like
Dave,
I did feel like
Amy went
you.
first. Come on, dude.
It's all good. But there's been a lot of research into the Flynn effect of IQs steadily going up over the years, and in odd turn of events, the Flynn effect has slowly been reversed. In the vast majority of countries, IQ is going down. So it may be Idiocracy may indeed go from fantasy to truth.
That just means we hit a plateau. We need a breakthrough.
No, it means
That
that
is
social
true.
media is killing our brains.
That
It means
too.
technology is taking over and doing. We don't need to be as smart as we used to.
The Bing bot allows anyone or Bard or ChatGPT to explore the knowledge face, even if you're a dumbass and drunk.
I think that's a good thing.
You
not a
don't
bad
have to go to Google search results and integrate it in your own mind. You can ask fanciful questions or real questions and explore on your own curation of autodidaction. The future is bright, I think.
Yeah, in all seriousness, we probably just hit the upper limit of how much, because it's mostly like backed off in developed countries. Developed countries which have already reached the upper limit of like nourishment and toxin elimination. And so if you don't have lead in your water and if you eat a nutritious diet, then the Flynn effect is going to no longer be much of a thing.
Indeed, it's probably steadying out, and then as we have the entire world kind of normalize out to a certain number, like you said, it'll plateau.
But I do think that there's room for improvement in various kinds of like education and like things that affect the brain other than just food and toxins. So we know that stress affects the brain in ways that have lasting effects on IQ. So, for example, getting rid of poverty, getting rid of domestic violence, getting rid of other kinds of abusive, stressful environments, and giving people like healthy challenges, the kind of challenges that are hard, but which give you some mechanism by which to overcome them such that you come out smarter. If we do more of that, I think there's a little bit more room, but it's kind of like Moore's Law, right? If you hit the end of Moore's Law, congratulations, you hit the end of Moore's Law. You have like, sub-nanometer chips and pat yourself on the back. It's not the worst thing in the world to reach the end of some exploitable physical property.
Well, I think that that law is like, what is it measuring exactly? It's mostly just measuring what our brain can do for general kind of.
Density of transistors on the
No, wrong. The other one,
board that you're
the law not Moore's law, the one about.
Yeah, Moore's law is basically the measurement of how much computation can be
Not
done
Moore's
in a
law.
given amount of
Not
space.
Moore's law.
The Flynn
Flynn
effect
effect.
is
Flynn effect.
measuring G, which is for general intelligence.
Well, what is general intelligence is mostly just your ability to do basic processing skills, memorization of common facts, that kind of stuff. And so it's
abstract reasoning. Yeah.
So it's not really measuring education stuff. Like obviously our education can get better.
There's a correlation though. So for instance, like when people go
tests
through
are not
when people go through like
because the goal of the test is more just the
Sure,
ability
but-
to test your ability of just general processing of information and memorization of common facts.
Yes.
Because it's trying to get the
Yes,
IQ
and most of that
stuff.
Yeah, and most of that is durable over time. However, there are changes in IQ scores over time. And one of the things that has the most significant effect on them is like significant traumatic kinds of stress. So like kids that grow up in abusive homes, it has an effect on their IQ. People that go through wars and like, extreme tragedies often have their sort of general intelligence slightly adversely affected because their brain has been shaken up so much.
prenatal as well.
But I also want to do a PSA out there that God does not exist. Just throwing that out.
Quick question here. So, I am a non-cognitivist. Non-cognitivist. I can't even pronounce the damn word.
Cognitivist.
On Mars?
I just say ichtheism just to make it so much fucking easier. Based on this conversation that I've been hearing, it seems like a lot of people share a lot of the same qualities of that. I'm curious where people's positions are on it, or if they actually identify as it.
So a non-cognitivist is just somebody who just thinks something can't be understood. Are you for God, for morality? What kind of non-cognitivist are you?
So for me to understand what somebody's talking about, like if they're making a claim about the ontological nature of reality, then I would need a description or a definition that would also follow the same rule. And so if they provide these properties or definitions that don't have an ontological basis, then I don't know what the hell they're talking about.
Well, you can know what someone's talking about without it having like empirical verification. So like I can say the fundamental nature of reality is spirit dust or something. Like that wouldn't be incoherent, because we can have a definition of what spirit dust is or what properties spirit dust would have or whatever, even though it's never been verified.
But that's not what I didn't mean an empirical basis, because I don't know if there's anything that's not empirical. I'm not necessarily going down that route. I'm just saying that in order for me to understand, like you're talking about something in reality, just giving me some abstract concept that hasn't no verifiable, way for me to understand what you're talking about in reality, because you could mean something completely different than what I think that you mean by it. But unless there's like, if you pointed a tree and go, that's a tree, and you use the word, I know what you mean by that word, right? But if you're just uttering a word and then you're trying to give descriptions, but there's no ontological basis within those descriptions, then I don't know what the hell you're talking about.
Well, that's where I disagree, because I think you can have conceptual transmission of ideas that have no basis in reality. Like Avada Kedavra. Like, you know what I'm talking about, right? A spell that kills people. Like, there is no basis in reality for that, but you can cognitively understand what it was referring to. Unicorns.
I mean, I don't understand what a spell is. Like, is it just words that you're uttering?
It is a thing that would, in reality, have some kind of physical effect that is outside of the normal physical laws, known as the magic stuff. So it's a new ontology.
Okay,
magic stuff.
What does it mean for something to be outside the physical laws?
The known stuff. Like this
don't know
isn't
what that
hard. Like
means.
it's not hard to say. There is a current ontology, physical matter, energy stuff, and there's another one that also could potentially exist called the magic field. And the magic field does magical spells when you wave your wand and say words. Like that's perfectly cognizable. You can cognitively understand what that would mean, what that would look like, and it could exist.
Well, I can create my own abstract thoughts around that, but it doesn't necessarily mean that I understand what you're talking about that.
That happens with every single word in every single conversation.
Yeah. So like that's what you got it. That's it. You did it. You got exactly what I meant by it. You did it. There you go.
I mean, words don't have any intrinsic meaning,
That
right?
doesn't matter.
They only mean what we mean by them.
Non-cognitivism means it cannot be understood. So if you have a concept in your brain,
that means that I don't understand. I'm not saying that it can't be understood. I'm saying that I don't understand. That's what I mean by non-cognitivism. So maybe I'm using a different and that's why we're having this conversation. Maybe I'm using a different word.
Idea. When I say Avada, you've seen Harry Potter, right?
Yeah.
When I say a gnome from Harry Potter, like you have a picture of a gnome from Harry Potter, right, in your head.
Well, yeah, because there's the entire movie. I can see what what Hollywood has created.
Movie, there was a book, right?
Okay, yeah.
And you have a picture of the gnomes from the book in your head.
A picture.
Like
well,
it gives a description.
Are you talking about the words?
Yeah.
Okay. So they're talking about a human-like creature. I know what human-like is.
So I can give you
an
humans are concept of something that's analogous to something we
exactly, but that's the ontological basis.
That's all
because human-like is an ontological basis. But that's what I'm talking about with. But that's what I'm talking about with God. Where is the ontological basis for these descriptors that they're using, like all-knowing, or omnipotent, or omnipresent?
What is hard to understand about all-knowing? Knows all facts. How is that not hard to? How is that hard to understand? It makes perfect sense.
Knows all facts, but where's the ontological basis for that?
It's analogous. I know one fact: 1 + 1 = 2, and 1 + 1 and 1 + 1 + 1 = 3, and so I can just analogize that and say, okay, now all facts. So there's a starting point of one fact, and this refers to all of those things, all facts.
Yes, But where is the
some people
ontological
know
basis for
more.
that property, though? That's what I'm saying. That
It's really simple. Look, some people know more things than other people. You can imagine someone that knows more than them, and then you can
Yeah.
extrapolate that and imagine that someone knows as many things as possible, and someone.
You're
Right.
talking about imagine.
That's what we're talking about. That's what conceptualization is imagine.
Exactly. We're talking about concepts. What I'm talking about when I'm talking about non-cognitivism, igtheism, I'm trying to separate these concepts from reality. And so in order for me to understand what you're talking about, because you're making a statement about reality, I need to be able to differentiate between a concept and what actually exists. So
Right.
if you're using these property sets that are purely conceptual, that don't have an ontological basis, then I don't understand what you're talking about.
No, you understand what I say.
Stop. So just
Okay,
to clarify, cognitivism is just concepts, what you can cognitively visualize. So cognitivism is about concepts. So non-cognitivism means non-concept. You can't have a concept. So I don't think non-cognitivism is the right word for you to use there, because it's specifically relating to concepts. So if you're saying that it can't be a concept, it's non-cognitivism. If you're saying that the concept isn't, you can't differentiate the concept from reality, that's something different.
Yeah. So what you're saying is what you're saying to theists, your concept does not match with reality. Therefore, what you're saying is I don't understand it. But non-cognitivism is to say is you're giving this concept and I cannot even conceptualize that. I don't even. It's like if someone's a married bachelor or a one-ended stick or round square. Those are things you cannot conceptualize.
I can conceptualize. One-ended stick can be conceptualized. One-ended stick is totally logical. It's just like a question mark. Just keep the question mark going. It's a one-ended stick. Perfectly fine. They actually exist.
Okay. All right, but if they were, as I meant, like a logical contradiction, like a married bachelor, like that cannot be conceptualized.
Like whatever T-Jump told me so far, I did understand. I could conceptualize it. It's sort of like in the same way you use like an AI image generator, you give a like very abstract concept. It is able to approximately understand. You don't need a precise understanding of that. Like if both of us agree on language and understand like the relationship between facts, if there is like a vague description of something, you can have an approximate understanding of what they're trying to convey. But the moment they increase the clarification by like, if I tell T-Jump, okay, I got an approximate understanding, like clarify that further by giving me extra information. If he gives me more information, then I get a higher clarity on what the concept is, even though it's abstract. So you don't need a precise understanding. If you agree on language, that's it. Like approximate conceptualizing.
I understand what you guys are saying, and I guess that's where I maybe. So when I'm talking about non-cognitivism or igtheism, like I said, it's not that I can't create my own conception of what you're talking about. But what I'm trying to talk about is like when the conversation always starts with God exists. Well, what do you mean by exists? Manifests in reality. Okay, great. We've got that set aside. Now I'm asking you what you mean by God. First thing that usually comes out of the mind is like some sort of mind or entity that exists absent a brain. I don't know what the hell they're talking about, because when I'm talking about mind, I'm talking about an emergent property of the brain. That's what I mean by a mind. So if you're trying to mean something else other than that, then I would need some sort of demonstration, because you made an ontological claim. I can conceive of a mind absent a brain, but I don't know what that actually means. I don't know what that actually, I don't know if my concepts actually hold any basis in reality. And that's what I mean by I don't know what you mean when you're saying that there's this mind absent a brain.
I don't know. I could understand that perfectly fine.
Well, I think again,
I think
he's not using cognitivism, non-cognitivism as the ability that it cannot be conceptualized. He's using it to say it cannot be verified as correspondent to something in reality. So he's using cognitivism in a slightly more strict sense than the way it's typically used in philosophy.
You could just reframe the whole thing as verificationism, and it would probably be more accurate. Verificationism was popular at one time under what was called logical positivism. The problem with logical positivism, which is basically the position that metaphysics wasn't a thing, was that it turned out that metaphysics was kind of a thing even for scientists in terms of talking about things like theoretical physics. And so it's been abandoned largely by the people who originally expounded it, like George Bernard Shaw, for instance. So I think there's reason to think that you can conceive of a version of what someone is trying to explain. Sometimes you have to steelman it because the way they explain it seems very circular or very weak. But for example, the way I steelman God hypotheses is with simulationism. I make simulations for a living. I can conceive of simulations that would appear like they were run by God to the occupants of the simulation. Do I think that those simulations would be like our world? No. And I've given arguments for why I think it's implausible that we live in a simulation. Do the theists think that that is what they're talking about? No, because the theist thinks that the thing that they're talking about is God, is the necessary being, and is the thing that's uncreated and all of that. But it's sufficient for me to say, okay, look, I can imagine a world where something almost like what they're arguing for, although not exactly like they're arguing for, actually could be plausible. There's lots of reasons to think that it's not very plausible.
Yeah, I think we can entertain things like either simulation or multiverse or things that would transcend our version of time and space. We just, not only do we not have any good evidence, they have no good evidence for their theistic position. Keep on plugging at that. Come on, theist, take the bait. Come on.
I do have a
Is everyone
question.
here atheist?
Yes, I'm an atheist.
Yeah, I'm atheist.
So it's like a gang of like 11 atheists here.
Yes, that's typically what this show is. Did you not know that?
I didn't know that, man. I just always come here, you know, just to chat a little bit. I
We're a
guess.
bunch of hyenas. We're gonna all attack you at once.
Right.
Oh, we had a nice chat before.
We're piranhas swimming in the river waiting for someone to jump in.
Can anybody answer this question for me? I just have like a quick doubt. So let's say that somebody proposes a scientific hypothesis, and you have placed a methodology and everything. Like you have not yet made testable predictions. Can you get a paper published still if it has like an empirical basis?
Yep.
Yeah, it's called theoretical physics. So theoretical physics is full of conjectural papers, but what they have to show is some kind of plausible mathematics, essentially, which would at least be empirically adequate to the things that we have already observed. What they can't usually do at first is propose experiments that could delineate between like the good and bad underdetermined candidate hypotheses. But every once in a while, they are like at least suggesting that there is such an experiment possible and suggesting a research program by which we could arrive at a way of getting there. For instance, the time and space being emergent stuff was published prior to the experiment that was described by Katerina that appeared to provide some weak empirical support for it, right? So
Higgs boson.
That paper was published. It got Katerina thinking. Katerina designed an experiment that might be able to demonstrate a version of it, and it provided enough evidence that it's now like a slightly empirical theory.
Higgs boson was hypothesized by
make
Higgs 30 years before the experiments that confirmed it.
So how do you make a distinction between the papers that are published that is currently in the state of just being a hypothesis without evidence and the one with evidence? Like, is there any
experimental confirmation, quote unquote confirmation, right? Let's just call confirmation non-disconfirmation, right? If you've actually tested something and it wasn't disconfirmed, that's what we usually mean when we say we've found evidence for something in science. Because it could be that some other test, it might fail. We just haven't ruled it out by some experiments that would tempted to do so. And that's what we mean when we say it's falsifiable, is we try to come up with ways to falsify it. That's way better than not trying. And the things that withstand like nonstop attempt at falsification become the actual prevailing theory.
Makes sense.
Anybody else? Questions, comments, philosophy, politics, religion, potatoes.
I just want to know where you guys are coming from. Like what makes you guys not believe that is the God in a way, you know?
Same reason I don't believe in Santa Claus.
No evidence.
You guys just don't believe in like the religion bullshit, or?
Yes.
No evidence for God.
I used to believe in some religion, and I studied cognitive neuroscience, and I don't think it's plausible that the things that brains do with neurons and the things that artificial neurons are able to reverse engineer are doable by nebulous, non-physical stuff?
Well, for me, I was an atheist my whole life, pretty much.
Were you a
Yeah,
skeptic?
A skeptic? No, I was like I had to go to Christian camp when I was like 6, but like even then, like I just didn't none of it. Like I never bought any of it. They told you to pray to God, pray to Jesus. So I'd pray to Jesus on the school bus, and I never got an answer back. And I just, as a 6-year-old, I just figured, if I'm not, my prayers are not being answered, it's probably not a God. Just
That makes sense.
6-year-old logic, but yeah, that was how I came to that
You know,
conclusion as a
what's
6-year-old.
strange? What's strange is like it turns out to be the case that you are only as good as the information you take in. Like, I was a Christian before, but had I not had access to the internet or like watched debates, I would still be stuck in this bubble of God really existed. Because once I asked a priest, like science really talks about like how is this possible for God to exist and how could he have created the universe? And his answer to me was like God exists outside of space and time. And at the time, even though I was a little bit scientific, I had some information. I believed every other thing that he said, right? Like whatever he explained. But the point is, back in the day, I did not really research much on the internet. But had I stayed in that bubble, I would always just believe that. So, thank God, or say thanks to the internet and like access to information.
So I really want to credit education and critical thinking for me stepping out of my faith. I grew up religious. I grew up Christian, Presbyterian, and when I got into college, we had to take critical thinking classes, and we had to go over logical fallacies. And once I started learning about those, I was like, wait a minute. I do this one, I do this one, I do this too. And I'm like, oh, these are all bad reasons for why I believe in God, and I do all of them. So then I started thinking, do I have any good reasons to believe in God? And I couldn't find any. So I eventually let go of my belief.
Dang. So it's just like more like everyone here has been in a way like religious but left, for different reasons.
Yeah, I used to be religious, but around my teenage age, I just couldn't believe it anymore. And by my 20s, I was looking deeper into theology and just in the opposite direction.
I was never religious.
Yeah, I get why you guys don't believe like the God, like religious God. Like me personally, I get why you guys don't believe that.
What do you
I
believe?
think it's very easy to get brainwashed by information, and most humans are gullible. Like the vast majority of humans are stupid. Like they believe in all kinds of things without evidence. So the more information you get in, the more you look at the world from a skeptical lens and look at experimental verification to know between imagination and like reality. Then you understand that most of your beliefs are by default false, and you have to like improve that by using rational thinking skills.
I mean, most people's beliefs are most people when they grow up, like the beliefs are already in like a really bad direction because programmed, they be programmed a certain way. So and it might be bad for them in the future. So
What do you believe?
like I believe it's on my profile. It's just in terms of energy and that type of stuff. I know people don't like uh, believe that thing that much, but
Well, the
I
word energy generally means to do work, at least if we're using it in a physical sense. And
yeah.
so, not to use a pun, but I would just want to nail some of those beliefs down. Are you a
Yeah,
Christian?
okay. I used to be.
Oh, I like that already.
I don't even call I wouldn't even call myself Christian anymore, to be honest. Uh, I guess for me personally, like I was I'm still trying to like look more into it, but like I just look at I even look at a lot of other sources too. Uh, like even like some like Christian, like the Bible Christian sources, like yeah, not good. It's not looking good, but yeah. So I just Yeah, not anymore, to be honest.
Well, that's good because I think the main theology that we come across that we have a problem with is tending to be the 6,000 young earth variety. But I think that the more metaphorical that you go, the more that you go towards an acceptance of science. I mean, the more you go towards being rational and accepting reality.
Yeah, so like when I was a kid, like I had this big book. It was basically it was like the Bible, but it was like separated into like short stories. So it was basically the New Testament, but all of it. I think it was even some Old Testament stories, but it would like put it into like a way that a kid could digest it, and there would be like illustrations, and it would be like separated into like short stories, right? So like, you know. But anyways,
What's it
even
called?
as
The
a kid, like I
Message?
read this multiple times, and like even as a kid, I realized that this is so ridiculous. Like all these stories, they're just
There's a really
how
good
could
version of
anyone
that.
believe this actually happened? You know,
There's
or this
there's
is
a
like
great version
true.
of that called the Brick Testament. Have you guys ever seen the Lego Bible Brick Testament?
No.
So someone painstakingly illustrated all the most interesting stories from the Bible using Legos. And so they recreated Deuteronomy, the like when to stone your children, when to put the non-believers to death, when to destroy all of your neighbors and salt their fields so that nothing ever grows there ever again.
Tell me they did Judges 12:5-6, the shibboleth. The shibboleth. If you can't say this word, man, woman, and children die.
That's right. Yeah, you got
It's a good one.
if you say anything other than the correct pronunciation, you will be put to death. It's very, very
But
fun.
I'm from New York.
Yeah, I'll post it in religion chat if anyone has the religion chat text channel. It's a lot of fun.
So that was Shibboleth, right?
Yes.
Heretic. Yeah.
You say tomato, I say tomato, and I get sliced.
Yeah, I
Hey
think what
guys,
we need like a biblical archaeology and like biblical criticism book that kids can understand. That would be a breakthrough.
Well, that god seems to not like a lot of things. He killed someone just for picking up sticks on the Sabbath. It's hardcore.
do you mind? Do you mind if I apply? Like, do you mind if I'm critical of some of the arguments that have been presented before me?
Go right ahead. Do you want to say just quickly what it is that you believe?
I'm not radical atheist, but I'm someone that believes in the idea in which, unless there is a better idea than atheism that could be presented, that there is like atheism would be the rational choice, in my own opinion.
Okay. And you
But
had something else.
after that, it's I'm sorry, but after it's okay to be agnostic as an example of like essentially expressing one's like non-conformist, like a beliefs about yes or no. It's better to be like not just black and white when it comes down to opinion, of course. But I would argue that a lot of this comes from essentially the idea that there is this arrogant scope in which we have based via our own consciousness of the idea in which, and not from a nihilist perspective, but far more from the ability for us to acknowledge our own consciousness, where we think that we're special, we make up narratives that essentially answer all arguments. I am not of the intellectual ability to be able to know and give answers for a lot of the things that religion does, but I'm also okay with knowing that I don't know in a way in which is not agnostic, but accepting the fact that we don't have enough answers there at the moment. There is this like Disney narrative that we should be special and we should have an understanding of the world in which we may not be capable of doing so as of yet. Does that make sense?
Sure, if I could actually just comment that our position is very specifically the exact opposite. As long as you're coming forth with us at knowing that consciousness is not special, that the mind is not special, that we are products of natural processes, physical processes, that we are animals. And so it would not make sense for a deity to be a conscious being very specifically because consciousness, once again, is not special.
I agree. I'm not arguing that there is a deity. I'm simply saying that our acknowledgement of consciousness means
So
that
you're
we
an
have a
atheist.
tendency to think that we're inherently special because there is this like magic notion within the normative discourse that because we acknowledge that we exist, that is in any way special. We're not nihilist. I'm not degrading the value of existence, but far more just like the deeper philosophical notions that as a result of acknowledging that we exist, why there doesn't need to be some magical. We have to have this framework and understanding of ideas, and in actual fact, it's okay to not know. And religion is essentially just it is its own God of the gaps argument.
Sure, but what you're in essence saying in a long roundabout way is
I do
you're an
apologize.
atheist. So welcome on
Yeah,
board. Be
I
welcome. And
stated my intention at the beginning. Someone asked me what was my beliefs.
Yeah.
sure, but you are in essence explaining that you are an atheist, and so you're going to have to explain trying
Yes.
to separate yourself out from why you wouldn't be after explaining why, in essence, you agree with all the other atheists.
Why would I have to
Wait,
explain
so
why I
what?
wouldn't be an atheist?
Wait,
What was it?
are you trying to say
What?
that you disagree with us
No,
in our
stop.
positions, or
So
are you?
DMT, what was it? The first thing you said you wanted to present was arguments that you heard or something.
It was a kind of notion of the way in which we interact with life based on nothing more than it being. It was more. It was a fluffier, like kinder and gentler way of essentially accepting the fact that, in my opinion, we have to acknowledge that there is this huge amount of arrogance that comes with the acknowledgement of our own existence, and with that means that not from an atheist perspective, but just from more of a generalizable perspective, we have this issue of there has to be narratives that will fulfill our insecurities when it comes down to questions in which we may not be able to fulfill. And I had an issue with the way in which it was being presented, and like I don't want to beef anyone specifically, but from an atheist perspective, for it to be this gentle, like, oh no, it's all okay, when actually it's far more like brutally, like we have to just accept that we have this ignorant arrogance based on the idea that we can acknowledge that we exist.
Well, I do not understand that. Don't get it.
I do apologize. So long story short, the best way to put it is that our own acknowledgement of our existence and our consciousness means that we have this ability, or we have this notion most of the time, and I can't speak for everyone, to be arrogant in the way in which we have like self-worth of just simply based on the idea that we can acknowledge that we're conscious.
You're saying
When
we have an
acknowledge that we're
anthropocentric kind of intuition. Like we feel
Yes.
like the universe revolves around us, even if it's not
Yeah,
true.
yeah.
We feel that way.
Yes, on a Disney Channel level, when it comes down to like answering deep rooted like why are we here questions.
But I would
I think
say
you're
most
also-
of that thinking comes from theism. That comes with this notion that we are special, that we have this sort of tying with a god that would be otherworldly. I know Shane was about to say something, but I think you would find that I can't say that there aren't atheists that don't find that they're special and that their mind is the very only one in the universe. I think you're going to find that. I think you're going to find that type of arrogant position that you're saying. I think you're going to find that as a minority position in the atheist and especially the skeptic community.
Right.
But that
exactly.
unto itself is the same would be arrogance. The acknowledgement of the conscious. It's a lose-lose for everything. I don't mean to present like a paradox when it comes down to talking points, but to acknowledge that you have special information and therefore blah blah blah. I don't mean to be a dick, but I'm trying to get anyone to acknowledge, or anyone that can hear me, to essentially understand or even just agree with the idea that it's not about us being special. We all know that we're not special, but there is a genuine tendency for humanity to tilt towards the idea that because we can acknowledge that we exist, we have to fill in arguments in ways in which make sense, even if they're actually completely inconclusive. Ergo, atheism makes way more sense in every way. But atheism doesn't always answer all of the questions. But then there is, as a side point of this, the idea that atheism has its own air of arrogance because, once again, it's special information in a way in which, like, these people are sheep, they don't get it because we have special information, which is equally as stupid.
Well,
It doesn't have
atheism
to
is
be a we
only.
they.
I'm sorry. Well, but atheism only is trying to offer an answer to one simple proposition: does a God exist? If people try to mix politics or anything else in, it is something
I
else.
know. I'm very much anti-theist. I understand the very notion of atheism is incredibly important to me, but
Are
I
you
don't
saying
think
like
that
we're an
atheists would be
exclusive
atheists
club?
if it was proven that gods exist. Atheists work on the notion that it's based on evidence.
Yes. Why is that? Yes.
So yeah.
So we work on the notion
Yeah,
that it's
because
based
they're
on
not idiots.
evidence, which is arrogance.
Yeah. No, not evidence is not based on arrogance by any means. I'm saying that atheists are very rational. I am an atheist myself, but I'm also very arrogant, but for different reasons.
I think what you're trying to say is that it's the human nature to want to know the answer to things and to not want to say I don't know and to have problems saying I don't know. And it sounds like you're saying that some of us here, without, I don't know, you're not mentioning any names, are doing that and saying we do have an answer even though we're not sure, and we're plugging almost like quote unquote atheists into the gaps. But I don't think that's what's going on. I think skepticism, the whole point of skepticism is to embrace when you don't know and say, hey, just if there is no, evidence to support this belief, then we don't believe it.
Yeah, evidence-based argument, 100%. But then it comes down to the idea that we should question our own narratives of how we assess things unto themselves, to the point at which are we not then being skeptical of the idea that we're essentially overarching from like a judgmental and narrative-driven point of view, our own egos onto the idea. I do personally believe that I'm correct as an atheist, but that doesn't mean that I don't have this overarching kind of emotively backed kind of thing that does lurk in the background of my own mind when it comes down to assessing other people that aren't atheists, which is equally as arrogant in a way in which I don't think is productive in any way, shape, or form. It's incredible. It's impossible to be objective, of course, and to be nice and neutral was obviously being right when it comes down to evidence-based things. But I also like it completely depends on one's perspective. Within the Western world, you guys clearly have the ability to be able to evaluate evidence and be like, yeah, this clearly is not correct. But then if you look at different cultures and the ways in which cultures perceive things, then evidence will clearly lie within different realms. So as an example, the Middle East might perceive our idea of what is evidence-based correctness to be absolutely absurd from a culturally narrative-driven point of view, based on like sociological arguments that create a notion of nations unto itself.
So T, so what I've heard so far, you're saying that you get ego from there's the ego that comes from being self-conscious, basically.
No, the ego derives from the acknowledgement of consciousness itself. Only in my opinion, I'm not trying to espouse like in any way like scientific stuff. It's more just my own opinion. The ego is formed by the acknowledgement of one being conscious, and then after that, it then sadly sometimes I'm equally as guilty, of course, can corrupt itself by having what would be known to be learned ideas and which are better, but then espousing them in a way in which is essentially looking down on people. Like the normative terminology would be like sheep or sheeple, when it's just like, yeah, but look at these like Abrahamic idiots. They have no fucking idea. Like Islam's a joke, obviously. Culturally ruins things. Like the Western world, in my opinion, is far better than any other narrative when it comes down to societal things. But though, like Islam ruins things or Christianity ruins things, but I would view them as lesser when it comes down to their own ideological beliefs. But they have weirdly far more like a commitment and power in a way in which we don't, because we're more malleable as a result of evidence-based learning and ability to adapt. Like if we all of us were shown God today, we would be like, okay, so God exists, but the idea that we don't is the reason why we're atheists.
Okay, I understand what you're saying, but like,
Could
as
I
as
jump in here?
atheist,
Because I've spoken to DMT
Saxon,
for
Saxon,
hours, so
Saxon,
maybe I can build a little
Saxon,
bridge,
hello,
especially that DMT can understand
Saxon.
himself. When DMT, when you put on your webcam or look in a mirror, there's
Yep.
a bias that people automatically have because you look marvelous, as they say. So I
Thank
want to
you.
ask you this, DMT. What's your
Yeah.
cover story why you don't think sex is stupid?
Okay, okay, Saxon, that's just a
Really?
complete tangent.
You
I
ready?
actually want to
Continue
address. I
with
want to
whatever you
address.
like,
No,
but
no, no,
that's the
Saxon, you do
advanced
this all the
drop-in.
time, man.
Thank you.
I'm trying to address this point. You're
Jackson,
just
without being
asking
rude to you, I
me
love you loads,
irrelevant
but could we
questions.
not derail? Is that okay? You're an amazingly valuable human being, and I think that you're a really
Okay,
good part
okay,
of
yeah,
the
DMT. I'm trying to ask you a question here. So I lost my train of thought. Fuck, give me 1 second. I lost my train of thought.
I use augmented intelligence by using the Google Live transcribe on an old Android, so my old words I can always scroll back. Thank you.
But I think that makes sense. I'm not fucking with you.
Anyways, I was going to ask you. So yeah, we live in like I live in Canada, right? But I'm not sure. I'm assuming you live in the UK. So
I live
we
in
live in the
London right
Western
now.
world,
Yeah.
right? The Western world is predominantly it's built on like Christian values. Even
Yes,
to
it
this
is.
day, like the
Yeah.
government,
Don't agree with
like
that.
when the president, like when a president gets sworn in, just one example of many. Yes, what does he do? He swears on a Bible, right? So like
Yeah.
these Christian elements, they're still predominantly, the center of our society,
I agree.
and
I agree.
as atheists, right, we're not cultish, right? We're not trying to like spread a cult here, right? We don't force.
How can
When
you
I have
spread a
children, I'm
cult
not
of
going to
evidence?
force them to go to an atheist church. I'm not going to force them to read like
There
force
would
them to
be
be
no
atheists.
atheist church.
I'll teach them critical thinking, but I'm not going to, shove atheism down their throat, right?
Because
But
you're
we're
not, you're because you're
if
not
you're
a bit.
if I was a Muslim parent or a Christian parent, I'd probably shove my religion down my children's throat because that's what they
Well,
do, right?
I just
They
want to
indoctrinate
point
their
out
kids,
that can I
force them
just
to go to
point out
church,
that
force
some
them
of
to read the
those
Bible,
things that
etc.
you were saying on there, they have gotten put in within the last 50 years, like in God We Trust on the money and stuff. And so the Christians have been trying to perniciously get into our culture, even though many of
What
our,
do you
founding
mean?
fathers were deists and they thought,
They
fundamentalist
were.
and the Puritan
Sorry.
culture was horrible.
Can I ask you a question based on what I think it was something that you've got long hair in your picture. I would like to just raise like a rebuttal to this. The idea that
Is
the
this your
founding
first
fathers
time
weren't in
reading
any way
English? You didn't
religious.
know how to read my name.
Sorry, it's just I'm being lazy. I do apologize. I can
That's
happily read your
okay.
name. It's
What's up?
Amy Newman. The idea that the founding fathers weren't religious and had no ties to, let alone masonry, regardless of Christianity being the forefront of the way in which they conducted themselves on a
Freemasonry is
morality
mostly a
level, is
deist
absolutely absurd.
organization. So let's start with, were they supportive of the Abrahamic religions? Absolutely
Yeah,
not. Thomas Jefferson
yeah, they were. They were
hacked the
Masons.
Bible. Okay, but Masons aren't Christians.
Yes, but they literally are at the same time. So and on
Sure, but
top of
that's
that,
not what the word literally
Wow.
means. And so, no.
but the entire narrative surrounding all of the people that went over to America and did far better than the UK ever could. First of all, with dentistry, let alone like freedom, hashtag like 2A all the way. But after that, like they were all Christians. Like these people were all Christians when they
Once
went there
again,
in the
no, they
first place.
weren't.
It was nutrition. But
Wait,
They were
dentistry?
No. So a couple things here. One, the dentistry was because we have universal health care. Of the dentistry was covered under healthcare in America. It wasn't covered in Britain. That's why we did dentistry better.
Yeah,
But it
it's
doesn't matter.
amazing.
The point here was that no, the founding fathers were not Christian. Literally, one of the quotes from Thomas
Okay.
Jefferson was this: "The American as a nation was not founded on Christian values." In the Treaty of Tripoli, he wrote it specifically to
Yeah.
say that no, this is not a Christian nation.
That was James Madison.
It was, I think maybe you're right.
Or
You might be
Monroe.
right. But it doesn't make a difference. This was not founded on America was not founded on Christian values at all. Even though Christians were in charge and tried to impose their values and take over the values, it was not founded on Christian values at all. The values it was founded on was humanist values, which precede Christianity by thousands of years.
Okay, I stand corrected. So that they're deists. They're not like necessarily like what one would
They're
call
humanists. They're humanists. The
they're
values,
but they're deists.
the
They're
values.
New Testament
No.
Christians
The
essentially.
values have nothing to do with God. None. Zero.
Okay. I see. This is where I'd like to talk to all of you because as a staunch atheist, I personally believe that the moral framework in which we get our like entire understanding of what it is to do right and wrong. And I'm not some undercover Christian. Like I mean this very, very staunchly. Is that it is unfortunately coming from the moral framework of Christianity.
So
After that, we have the
Jainism.
Human Quality of Life Index, which is it surpasses it.
Jainism.
But you're not in Jainism. You don't watch over every ant in which you kill.
Jainism
Sorry.
comes before any other god religion. Jainism is one of the most oldest
I
religions.
understand.
There is no god in Jainism. Jainism is the most
I know.
moral of all religions. Has the most
But
morality.
that doesn't represent our moral values.
All of the moral values of the following religions come from Jainism and other religions like Jainism, other ideologies. They're humanist values that come from ingrained intuitions in humanity, which are then built upon and made up explanations for by religion. Just like how religion explains,
Right.
oh, well, why is there an origin of the universe? Ah, my God done it. They did the same.
Yeah.
Morality already exists
Oh, yeah.
without God. The moral values that are ingrained in society come
I don't believe it
from
would exist.
nature without God. And then the God was then slapped on a label to try to be a God of the gaps and explain why it's that way. So we are not built on Christian values. Christian values were
I
built
mean, we
on
are.
human values and a God of the gaps. Same with the argument from like the origin of the universe. There are no Christian values there. It is not Christian science that explains the origin of the universe. It's
I
they
don't think it's
slapped
Christian
on the
Science.
label
Sorry.
after it was already discovered.
I understand the whole concept of Jainism, but I don't think that really like truthfully represents the Western world. As although you are like actually accurate when it comes
that
down
was
to
not
it.
the point of the argument. The point of the statement here is that all
Yes, it
religions
was.
values did not come from religions. Values came from intrinsic human
Okay.
nature, and then religions made up bullcrap God of the gaps explanations to try to fit those values. So just like
Right, so is this a chicken and the egg thing?
no,
Because it
no, it's
feels
not.
like it.
No, it's not. Religion is 100% came after human values. Human values started. Religion and God came thousands of years after human values. Human values with no God came first in every case, 100% of the time, no exceptions.
I love you loads, and I'm not trying to be an arsehole, but think about the idea that values change based on like really like heavy cultural influences, such as religious differences.
Yes, yes,
Have
they
you
do.
considered
Yes,
this?
they do change. They
Yeah.
change in a very
So
particular
the
direction.
idea that humans have an intrinsic set of values that's biologically woven within them. Yes, on a very like intricate level, but then after that, cultural values, one being a huge representative via like differences in religion, may change the actual overall societal values of said
But
society
the
or
way
nation state.
the
Right.
way the societal values change over time is all in the same direction for every religion, everywhere in society, everywhere in the world. So the way moral
Why
progress
would you then
happens
reference Jainism?
to show that. So
I mean,
moral progress, there isn't such a thing. Christian values just don't matter. They're irrelevant, they're nonsense, they're nothing. Because the values that they come
Okay.
from are human values that exist without a God, and they precede
I love
all
you saying
religious
that.
values, all of them. So Christians
In fact,
I do,
pull
but on a
from the
personal
God.
level, I do agree with you. It's just like on a historical level, I do struggle with this. And there are
So-
obviously there are different societal values in which we can experience right now. And I know that that's not your point. And I know that you've made a point based on the idea that we're combating the idea that on a Western world value system, in which I made the claim that's where we get our value system from. And then your argument is that no, human values like essentially precede the idea of Christianity in a way in which it
Okay,
supersedes it
stop. Let me
essentially.
just
But
like,
then we
why do like Christians used to think evolution was sacrilege, went against the Bible, right? Adam and
that's
Eve.
fucking dumb as fuck.
Right. So Christianity is dumb as fuck. Yes, it
But
is.
look
Wait,
at the persecution of Galileo. Like, oh my
stop
god.
talking. Christians, what they do is when something that is useful or correct is discovered, they then take that and say, oh, it was a part of our religion all along. So back in the day, before Darwin, before the origin of species, Christians thought evolution was sacrilege. Then evolution was discovered. They said, oh, no, it's totally fine. It's totally fine. It fits with the Bible. They did the same thing with values and morality. Our nation isn't built on Christian values. It's built on secular values. And then Christians hijacked those and said, these were Christian values all along. You're just building society on Christian values. Like, no, we took Christian values, threw them in the garbage can and replaced them with something better. And then Christians tried to take credit for it. We are not built on Christian values. We are built on the opposite of Christian values. Christian values are garbage. That's why we're getting rid of them.
Separation of church and state.
What?
Okay,
DMT, I just want to ask you something real quickly. Like, you know, I feel like for a moral standard, you would need a mind. Like, you would need to have like a morality, like a subject, like a morality. You would need like a mind for that, right?
Yeah, of course, consciousness, like human quality of life index, easy.
Yeah, so like the morality that like the Christians wrote down and all of this stuff is they would need a human mind for that. It's no God because, for example, like
it's under the idea that we think that there's a God. We can understand that they believe that that's the case, and then really recognize that there's huge amounts of similarities between our own values and what they were saying. It's okay.
Yeah, because it wouldn't work out because their God doesn't have a mind, right?
How would it not work out? Like they believe in God, but regardless of that, it doesn't mean anything when it comes down to like a fundamental set of values and morality, like ways in which we work in the Western world. We can understand that there is a historical framework that does actually represent itself within Christianity, only to a certain point. Yes, T Jump made a very good point about the idea that there is very clearly the possibility that it goes and supersedes beyond the idea of Christianity. But after that, it's have we looked at the similarities? It's okay. I mean, I'm really happy that we don't have like a similar moral framework to Islam or
No, but
other
but
religions.
it's true
Christianity
what
is still
you're saying though,
fucking
because
Guys,
shit.
please give me like 1 minute, please. This is interesting because I joined this channel and it's called Atheist Call-In Show, and which means atheist means not believing in a god.
Anti-theist,
And
yeah.
you're all talking about morals and ethics and sort of these topics, but to me, when you say an atheist means a not God in the picture. So that means to me, what happens when you die? Do you just die, or is there heaven? Do you go? Is there some spirit in your
You
they
can't
don't believe in
conceptualize
heaven.
it.
So
You
I
can't
have to leave in
conceptualize
a
it, right?
minute. So I just want to answer that. I want to ask him a question and then say goodbye. But the answer to that
Me too.
question, I believe, is we just become worm food. Now, that is a sad fact. It could be opposite. You don't need to be an atheist and have an afterlife, a pro, or any which way. Because really, once again, it's just answering a single question. My question to anyone who believes in a Christian God would be very specifically, what about a man?
What about any other god?
Yeah, exactly.
That
True, but very specifically. What would a man coming back from the dead, how that would get us closer to any sort of sense of morality? And you could say
Zombie movies.
he said give to charity. You could say that he be kind to others, like T Jump and others have been saying. All of these philosophies have been well known and
you're
come
deviating from the
older
point I was
versions.
making.
Okay,
You're
well,
now again talking about
if your
morality.
point was about
Yeah.
worm food, I wasn't addressing your point. I already did. I was trying to talk about the other subject.
My
So it
point
was
was about
moving
a
on.
spiritual being within your mind. Is there?
Sure, that doesn't exist. That's just made up.
Let's
Well,
just
very
subjective.
quickly.
let's just address.
But spiritualism is subjective.
Sorry,
You can look at an amazing view on the top of a mountain and feel spiritual without being in any way religious.
If the original proposition was what happens when you die, is that correct?
I mean, we can address this. Like, if we're going to address the idea that there's no afterlife, yeah.
I want to clarify with Atlas just to make sure everyone's on the same page. Atlas, the original proposition was, regardless of whether God exists or not, is it possible that there's an afterlife? That was your question, right?
Yeah. So for me, if I'm speaking to religious people, the immediate sort of preposition, an obvious thing would be that they believe that if they do good in this world, when they die, they live on in another world. Like there's something after you die. So if you're an atheist, you believe that your body is just flesh. So if you die, it rots, and that's the end of you.
There's actually a
But
variety of
if
different
you're a
atheist
religious
beliefs.
person, if you believe in a deity, a god, or so on, and believe in a spirit, that you have a spirit which is disconnected from your physical body, that means that you believe that if you die, then there is some sort of your being, whether it is a
Are you
spirit
asking a
or a
question?
soul.
Yeah, you're just
So
making the claim because we want to know, do they have good evidence?
I'm not making.
So first of all,
I'm trying to
he's not even
explain
making a
myself.
claim. He's saying what someone else is making a claim about. Let's just clarify. We're trying to ask if you are asking a question or not, and if so, what is the question?
No, I wasn't asking a question. I was making a statement.
Your statement's
Okay.
wrong.
So you're making a statement, and the statement is something like, when you talk to people about God, they believe that they will have an afterlife. That's it, right?
Yes.
Okay. And is that in reference to anything else we're talking about, or you think that's important, or what?
Well, I mean, is that not the headline of the topic?
Well, for some
I think
people,
this
the
is
afterlife.
very important because look. I'm very. I love talking about morals and ethics and what is right and wrong and so on and so forth. But at the end of the day, we are mortal beings.
Okay, can I skip to
And
the
if
end?
you
So
if you are a theist and believe in that you have a soul, that then
you can have an
believe
afterlife
that
without
your
God.
soul.
There is equally as likely an
Yeah.
afterlife without a God as there is with a God.
How do I explain that to me? Because that I
So
don't
the
understand.
afterlife with a God is something that people have made up. They made up a story with a God, and in that made up story, they included an afterlife. The probability of that being true.
So you just made that up as well?
Wait. So the probability of that being true is equally as likely as any story anybody can make up ever. So it could be the case.
Jainism.
Wait. It could be the case that after we die in a physical, materialist universe with nothing but matter and motion, your consciousness, which is material, will be saved and transferred to some kind of an afterlife that we just don't know about yet. That's possible. It's possible to have an afterlife with a purely materialistic world with no souls, no God, and the probability of that being true.
How is that possible? I think
Before
you
you ask more
speak.
questions, I
think
was trying
you
to make an
speak with
outro when you interrupted me a little while ago. I sending
Being
loves to you.
aware of the situation is
Wait,
kind.
stop. Go ahead, Amy.
Not you, Amy. The person knowing
Bye,
that you're
Amy.
leaving.
Let Amy cook. Let Amy cook.
Sure. Well, I also didn't want to interrupt T Jump or X or anyone on the panel, but just very specifically, the part of your question would be atheism has nothing to do with an afterlife. It is something separate. You can be an atheist, a theist. You can be a theist that doesn't believe in afterlives. You could be an atheist that believes in some form of reincarnation or something that has nothing to do with a god. I'm just going to leave it there because I think T-Jump X or someone else is going to explain it. So, send in love. Thank you for being on as always. You can find me and my co-host at youtube.com, Amy Newman. And I'm sending love to you. Have a good night, all.
Good to have you, Amy.
Oh, and
Good
like,
night.
follow, and subscribe.
I completely agree with you, Amy, what you just said.
And the Jainist example that you brought up earlier on the morality question.
I don't.
Jainists also believe, without a theist God, that the soul survives and is reincarnated after it achieves liberation from its present life. It goes to another. There's nothing automatically about Christians and their ideas of the afterlife, which, by the way, evolved over time. The ideas of the afterlife in Christianity are very different from the ideas of the afterlife in the earliest books of Judaism. That evolving idea that we get from the Abrahamic version of the afterlife is just one version of it. Almost every religion has some kind of afterlife, just because it's one of the things, as you pointed out, I can't quite make out your name, Atlas, that people worry about, and so people come up with all kinds of answers which are kind of independent of, but usually related to their God or not God beliefs. And I wanted to say that I think there's actually a pretty good way of looking at what happens after you die, what life exists after yours ends, that doesn't rely on the belief in your own ego, literally in like supernatural form, flying around like a little ghost or going somewhere else or turning into a new you or whatever. And that is that the thing that most people care about in their later years is the well-being of the people that they care deeply about, that they've connected with throughout their life. And what most people care about is something like a legacy in the form of the living people that you care about being in good standing. And contributing to that is what most people devote the latter half of their life to, in the form of taking care of children and grandchildren and their family and their country and their community and so on. And when people die, having done all of that, they seem to be much more satisfied and feel like there's a sense in which the thing that they value most does live on. It's just not in the form of their ego or their individual life, but the values that they hold persist, and they win the game, so to speak, in their own hearts and minds by doing that. Even if it's scary to die, they're often dying with a smile on their face.
I just wanted to say, Alice, because you said atheists can't like, because we don't believe in souls, that like, or God, that we don't like necessarily believe in an afterlife. And I would say, yeah, most atheists probably don't believe in an afterlife at all. But like, I'm probably the part of the minority that like, I believe there's still maybe a possibility. I don't think it's likely. I just think it's a possibility, just like invisible unicorns are a possibility. And like, I'll tell you how. Like, there's a one. It's a crazy theory, but like, I feel like so we don't know much about our own conscious mind, right? So like maybe, and I'm just saying as a theory, that maybe part of our conscious mind is like tied to like some quantum world or like quantum field. Sorry, I'm not a physicist, or like a different dimension. It's just like tied somehow, and that like when we die, or just our conscious mind just goes into another, another body, and we just start life again. That would be like believing in reincarnation as an atheist, but that would be subtracting all the whole soul stuff, the God stuff, the spiritual stuff. It's crazy, I know, but like it's just a possibility of, yeah.
Pulling the strings actually, you must go to a channel on YouTube called Quantum Gravity Research. They are actually trying to decode the very exact thing that you're talking about. They have already published multiple scientific papers, but they are also trying to understand the relationship between quantum gravity, consciousness, and how it might connect to some like new future theory of quantum gravity, which we don't fully understand. Which like to some extent, I do think that it might be the case that in the future, with like enough scientific breakthrough and with making successful predictions, it might be the case that a person who's having a conscious thought might be served with a different possibilities of the quantum world, like the many worlds interpretation of quantum mechanics. Your brain is having this free flow thought, and you have these like unfocused thoughts of the different potential possibilities, and somehow maybe there could be a communication with the quantum fields, your brain, and then eventually whatever thought you entertain in your mind that is connected with positive thoughts, like like emotions, either negative or positive, will be sort of like manifested into reality, like you divert into those timelines or whatever. But check it out, it's called Quantum Gravity Research. It's very interesting.
Okay, I will.
I mean, but there's a difference between reincarnation and afterlife, right? Because afterlife is supposed to be something with heaven or yeah. I would say reincarnation is a different concept than afterlife.
Oh, I didn't mean it in the religious sense. I didn't mean it that way.
So it's just interesting. So you're sitting with your brain and your conscious thoughts and subconscious thoughts, for that matter, and you go to sleep. Obviously your subconscious comes alive, and all of these things, and it's always working in the background. Then then you say, I have this. I have this framework of myself. I think this is me because I like this, I dislike this. This is how I feel when I see this, when I hear this, when I smell this, when I taste this. But then what I can do is I can take a spike and I can hammer it into your brain, okay? And I can take away half of all of that. Now you can live for another 30 years, but you can't speak anymore. You can't smell the stuff you used to be able to smell. You're in a wheelchair maybe. And when you die and your soul, like this, some sort of energy, I don't know how this energy stores information. I've never seen sort of electrodes like flying, you know. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna be quiet because
Yeah,
I
yeah. So
also
let me
have to
try
like
to jump in there. So a soul, essentially all it is a kind of a storage system that stores the essence of what your consciousness is, who you are, whatever it makes you who you are, memories, experiences, ability to think, what you think about. All that's all it is. And the question is if your brain is physical and all there is physical stuff and you damage the brain, how do you reset to that core of who you are? Well, guess what? There can be in the universe, whatever the core of what you are is, can be saved like a save file. And so we have the core of what you are is what you were when you were 28 or something. Who knows? Whatever that physical system is can be rebuilt. So if you take a steak and shove it into your brain and you lose a bunch of that could be rebuilt. So if you die, suppose you die, your brain decays, we can rebuild that brain, rebuild the consciousness with the fundamental nature of who you are. So you come back. Or we can just transfer it to a different location or upload it to a different physical medium. We can take your consciousness and upload it to a computer. And so we can do all these things in physics without a soul. And so you can have an afterlife with just physical stuff exactly the same as you have an afterlife with the magical soul. You just have a physical system that we just don't know about yet that can copy or reset your conscious state to the core essence of what it is and give you an afterlife in the exact same way a magical soul does. Magical soul stuff has no extra ability to produce any effect in reality that physical stuff can't do. So
it kind of reminds me a little bit of that theory, where they sort of transportation sort of from
Star Trek.
this space to that space. Yeah, something like that. Then what actually has to happen is they have to completely obliterate every cell in your body, and then on the other end they reconstruct every cell in your body, including your brain. But is that still you when you come out at the other end?
It's exactly the same amount of you that a soul is. So if you have a magical soul essence that is you, there could be a physical essence that is you, and that physical essence will be equally as much you as the magical soul stuff. So if you think magical soul stuff solves all these problems, saying that there is a physical essence there will also solve all of these problems.
I mean, I think physical essence doesn't make any sense. Because every cells is getting renewed in your body, right? So essence would be something that is not physical.
No, that's wrong. So again, anything the supernatural can do, the unknown natural can also do. So if you think there's some kind of magical soul essence hiding somewhere in your body, there could be an unknown physical essence also hiding in your body to do the same thing. So there is nothing that a soul can do that just an unknown natural force couldn't also do. Anything the supernatural can do, the unknown natural can also do.
If you would let me just one more minute, and this is the last thing I want to say, and then I'll shut up.
Go for it.
And this is my belief. I think that we are animals, just like any other animal on the Earth and on the many other planets in the universe. I think that we are advanced creatures with highly developed brains, prefrontal cortex. We are capable of even having this conversation, which is incredible. But I think we are made of flesh, and there's electricity in our bodies and in our brains. But I really do believe, and it's sad, I wish I would believe otherwise, but I think that that's where it ends. I think that that's it. I think we can speak to each other in a very sophisticated manner as we are doing it right now, but when the lights go out, that's it. I think there's no soul. I think it's perceived.
It's perfectly rational. It's perfectly
and that's
rational
pretty
to
much
believe
it.
that. But I'd say that there's always possible that there's more.
And I'll be quiet from now on.
Sure. So
I think it's very, very similar, right? It's very, very similar to a person prior to getting an operation. He gets general anesthesia, and when you get general anesthesia, you eventually go unconscious, and then you're undergoing the operation, and then you wake up. You don't remember anything. It's like a blank, like dead state almost. It's once you're dead, it's over.
So, sorry to interrupt, but I'm gonna have to go. It's 2:00. Peace out. I'll let the stage go on for a while and talk to you guys next week.
Really cool. This place is a little bit usually more